PCs get upgraded. MSX comes to Europe. And Coinop goes cartridge. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to find out what was making headlines in the home computer and video game industries of yesteryear. Today, we're going to be traveling back 40 years. Oh my goodness, it's been so long since I've done this. 40 years to September of 1984. I'm your host, Carl, and I'm joined again by everybody's favorite co-host, Alex.
Happy to be here, Carl.
Excellent. So, we haven't done this in a while, and as I warned everybody last time, I got a baby daughter, so yeah, schedule's been a little flaky lately, but that will not stop the proceedings, so as per usual, let's start off with some obligatory podcast banter. How have you been?
I've been okay. I don't even remember what we have in common anymore, Carl, to be able to talk about something. I don't know. Who are you?
Oh, let me tell you a story, young man. You may not remember those hazy days of yore when we would frolic on these here internets. No, just, I got nothing.
That sounds frightening.
All I have to say is I'm running on zero sleep at this point, and it's not just because of the news. So, it's all good. And that's why I needed to find refuge in the past.
Sounds like a bit of a Freudian slip there, Carl, I gotta say.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit. So, yes, you guys have been dropping episodes left, right, and center on a regular schedule.
That's true, we have.
Yeah. I just started listening to the latest one. That was the other Pong clones episode.
Yes.
Haven't gotten very deep into it yet. So I do have to ask, spoiler alert, do you also go into the East Block Pong clones?
No, we don't. What is it? The ESS-01, I think it is, over in East Germany. Yeah. No, there wasn't time to talk about every last thing. We did talk about Europe a little bit. We do talk about Intertone, mostly to be frustrated that nobody knows anything about Intertone. But and we talked about some of the British companies and a smattering of other European things here and there. But yeah, did not get to the that is a very interesting story though of the East German Pong console.
Cool. As someone who's actually played it,
nice.
It's one of the display pieces almost every year at the Lange Nacht der Computerspiele, the Long Night of Computer Games event in Leipzig. So they always bring it out, and every year I put my greasy little fingers on it because why not? It's cool.
Indeed.
Yeah. But, okay, so we have a lot of episode to do. So, and since everybody knows that we love short episodes here, we're going to try to do it fast.
I didn't know that everyone's other favorite co-host, the Micro Machine Man, was joining us, Carl.
I think we can keep this one under 6 hours, but I'm making no promises as I look at my notes. Is that a 78 next to the last story? Okay, on the spreadsheet. Yeah, this will be fun.
I mean, that's better by about 20 than the last couple of episodes, and that's not even a joke. That is actual math.
Yeah. This is going to be a relatively light episode, everybody. This is my promise to you. Unless, of course, the number on your screen for the length of the episode is telling you that I'm lying. But
in which case, if you know, you know. I mean,
exactly.
And just to give a little sneak peek or a little peek behind the curtain of how the sausage gets made, that doesn't mean there are 78 stories. It just means there are 78 lines in the spreadsheet, which also includes headings and additional notes and stuff as well. So
this is true. So it isn't quite 78 stories. It's probably more in the line of 65. So
indeed.
A little bit less, maybe. Yeah.
You should have said 64. You should have said 64, Carl.
It was a missed opportunity. It was definitely a missed opportunity.
Yeah. It's just a better computer number.
It is. It's the best computer number. Let's be very clear here. It's still the best computer number. Okay. Now, everybody who's been here before knows the drill. For those who do not know, when we talk about stories from September of 1984, we are referring to stories from publications dated September 1984, which may or may not mean that the events happened during that month because, sometimes magazines or newspapers are a little bit delayed with the news. And also remember, you can follow us on the socials. You can like us on your podcasting app or on YouTube. We're getting a lot more people listening to episodes on YouTube these days. So please subscribe because there's a lot of you listening there who are not subscribed. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And you can also check out all the episode archives with the full list of notes, which quite often get cut off, especially on YouTube because they're so extensive, on our Patreon site, where you can also watch the add-on bonus videos and all that other good stuff. It's all up there, and, chuck in $1 to help out cover server costs, because Lord knows we're not doing this to get rich. Lord knows we're not doing it for that. And I think I covered all the ad stuff that needs to be covered.
I think that's the usual boilerplate.
Yeah, that's the boilerplate. Okay. And so, before we turn on the time machine, we need to do our first major stop, which is the 7 Minutes in Heaven. This is the segment of the show where our intrepid co-hosts must play a game that was reviewed in a publication dated September 1984 that they have never played before. And September 84, some real big classics get reviewed here. We've got Montezuma's Revenge, Crime and Punishment. Tapper comes to the C64, a legendary port. Evil Dead gets the computer game treatment by Palace Software. Danger Mouse comes out. Match Point hits the Spectrum, one of the best tennis games. Planetfall from Infocom, Falcon Patrol 2, Avalon on the Speccy, Chiller on the C64, which is, that one's just weird.
Less legendary port than Tapper.
No, it's not the port of the Chiller arcade game.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
No, it's this weird wannabe horror game that's very, very reminiscent of a certain Mr. Michael Jackson's Thriller video.
Oh, yeah. I suppose the Chiller arcade game did come out in 1986, so that would have been quite a trick.
Yeah, that would have definitely been a trick. High Noon for the C64, one of the early games that gets put on the index in Germany. The absolutely legendary Elite hits the BBC Micro this month as well, which we will be talking about a little bit more later. But, sir, you chose the Epic's classic Impossible Mission.
That's right. I was never a C64 kid. Never had one. Very, very rarely played them at other people's houses, because most of my friends didn't have them either. And so, missed out on a lot of the classics, especially in that kind of 1983 to 1986 period when the C64 was really finding its stride as the main American machine for games. So yeah, I know it's a classic, but I've never played it before. So We'll have to see whether I keep it to 7 minutes and just stay a while, or if I stay forever.
Yeah, somebody's been doing their homework. Very nice. Very nice. Okay, with no further ado, let's have at it.
Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever.
Welcome back, Alex, from your 7 minutes in heaven. So, for the uninitiated, how would you describe Impossible Mission?
Well, Carl, I would say that Impossible Mission is a platformer with some light puzzle elements that really take some of the things kind of pioneered in the console space in Pitfall, like distinctive running man and navigating a maze-like series of rooms in order to collect stuff, and taking it to a whole new level, because it's not a Pitfall clone, but taking it to a whole new level with very interesting progression through individual rooms, some very nice enemy variety, enemy pattern variety, despite the fact that there's very little enemy variety, and some early GUI elements. So a very interesting moment in the evolution of platform games in North America.
That, I couldn't have said it better myself. I'd probably add a little touch of the extremely advanced presentation through the audio and the quality of the animation.
Oh, yeah, the audio, and we didn't really even talk about the audio during the 7 minutes, but yeah, the audio, I mean, putting that SID chip to use right there.
Oh yeah. I mean, they did some nice stuff in Summer Games with the music and everything else, but yeah, this idea of digitized audio to sort of just add those nice little touch moments, you know, their accents to the game is just phenomenal. Yeah. And somehow still managed to get the whole game in the 64K of memory of the system. No load times.
Which is, pretty impressive as well. Yeah, no, I was generally impressed by the whole thing. As we talked about in the video itself, the jump mechanics just growing up, I mean, me literally growing up in a post-Super Mario Brothers world, the jumping in the game is just obnoxious. As I said in the video, I don't penalize Dennis Caswell for not doing a standard that didn't exist yet when he created his game. So from a game design perspective, I don't penalize his choices, because this is very early in figuring out exactly what it means to be jumping around on the screen. But I would have preferred something with a little more momentum involved and a little more control behind where you land. This idea that the jump is just a fixed length and you really just have to figure out that exact spot to jump to the next platform. And you have several rooms that have very tiny platforms where there's no margin for error in that process. That annoyed me, but that's like the annoyance of a modern gamer. I don't think it would have annoyed someone nearly so much in 1983, because they would have just been like, oh, this is just the mechanic and I need to get on with it.
Yeah, definitely. As someone who played this not in 84, but I played it in 86, we still didn't know any better. It was just, okay, that's how this game works. You lived with it, and it fit in nicely with sort of the puzzle feel of it, where, it's an action game and you're still avoiding the robots and whatnot, but it still felt more like a puzzle game, so you kind of went along with it, even though, believe me, it was annoying to die over and over again. And this is where you're very, very happy that the game is running on a timer and not on lives.
Yeah, absolutely, which I think was a great choice for this game, and it kind of enhances the puzzle nature of the game. So if you die in a room, you don't even go back. It's not even like Pitfall 2, where it's like, and now we're sending you back to your last save point. It's really, you just do the room over again. So it's in that way, it's like, I mean, it's not as hard as they are, but it's like some of the extreme platformers of modern times, like your Super Meat Boys, where like each little individual room is like its own puzzle in a way, and you may die multiple times as you're trying to solve the puzzle of that room, but you can keep going and keep trying. Just like in most parts of Super Meat Boy, if you're hitting your checkpoints and all of that.
Gotcha. Yeah, and the big difference is that here, every time you restart the game, it's completely shuffles the order of the levels so that, yeah, you're playing the same rooms over and over again, but you're always playing them in a different order, which also means that your progression through them and where you're going to find the key cards that you need to find to solve the final puzzle also differs.
Yeah, nice bit of replayability for 1984.
Oh, definitely. I mean, this is why people kept coming back to it, and there's speedrunners that will basically, they'll start playing, and as soon as they realize that certain things are going to be way further away or they're not getting enough pieces right at the beginning, they'll just restart the playthrough. So you can't really have like an ultimate time on it because it just depends on the random chance of where you're going to find the pieces.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just pray to RNGesus.
So, would you recommend the game to modern gamers?
I would. If you're into this kind of platforming, I would say go ahead and stay a while. It still holds up pretty well. The jumping is frustrating, but if you can get beyond that or get used to it, I think it's a decent enough time waster.
Very cool. That's as good as you can hope for a 40-year-old game, everybody. So, with that being said, it's time to check in with our good friend Ethan to find out what we got wrong in our August 1984 jump in our segment, The Department of Corrections.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Ethan. So, now that
Carl, you've returned to 1984.
Oh no, that doesn't sound good. It's been so long, I don't even remember what we talked about back then, let alone what I did wrong.
Well, you were spotted saying words that were untenable to the Department of Corrections, and there's a particular person that I think you've been seeing that we might have to have some words about. Oh wait, is he here? Is he here with us?
Is this a veiled reference to me?
Oh, hello, Alex. You're also on file in the Department of Corrections for August 1984.
I don't even remember August 2024 anymore.
That was the before time. That was the before time, okay?
That's right.
I'm sure you've talked about the delay and all that, but so we'll leave that off to the side. But we will get into the Department of Corrections for August 1984. Again, bear with us, for it has been a long time since the recording of that, and I have not re-listened to it recently. So if some of these corrections don't seem to make sense, we will persist regardless. Firstly, we shall talk the Alex comment, for he is here. Now, I'm interested, Alex, because you talked about Nintendo and the NES seeming to want to, debut the NES at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show in 1984. Because there were several reports that they were going to show, well, the Famicom, obviously it was.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Not in its AVS form or whatever they were going to do. Now, I'm curious, if they wanted to do that, what would this change about the Nintendo story? Not like in the long term, but in terms of, they were waiting until early 1985 to see how things get cleared out. And when they showed it in winter 1985, you always said they never really intended to put it out the way that they displayed it. But if they were planning to be there in summer 1984, what might that change about the story?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And of course, I forget all the context almost that we were talking about it in earlier. But yeah, I mean, you have to figure that if they were going to try to do something there, that certainly it wouldn't have just been a New York test market at that point. I mean, I'm assuming that they ultimately probably decided against it because they thought that a test market approach was going to be a smarter approach. So I don't know that. I mean, I'm completely freebasing here on something I said like 4 months ago.
If I can put forward a theory here.
Yeah.
Now, I think that a showing of the home hardware, which was virtually identical to what they were selling in the arcades in summer of 84, because the Versus system just really starts to pick up steam in the summer of 84, would have had a chilling effect on their Coinop operations, because there was still such a spooked feeling amongst Coinop operators about home ports and how the console business had undercut them, that they would not have wanted to support a Coinop system that was literally coming out that Christmas at home and was going to be just as good as what they were selling. I think that probably would have had a chilling effect. And we're going to be talking about that on today's episode, because guess what's on the cover of Replay?
Yes, I love that cover.
That is a wonderful cover. Yeah, it's where they're all standing around in a nice library with the red.
But something I need to point out in this is that when they did debut it at the winter 1985 CES, they did have the Versus unit systems all there. That was the front of their booth. And then in the back of the booth was the AVS.
And here, and this is something that's not in the show notes for today, but it was an article in Playmeter magazine. It was a report from one of the editors who traveled to Japan for a tournament. I think it was for hyper sports or track and field.
Yeah,
it was either that or track. I couldn't remember which of the two. But so there's a team of U.S. players, and they go together with the editor of the magazine, and he talks about game centers in Tokyo and what the scene looks like there and everything else. And he talks about how they did see some Japanese versions of the Versus cabinets, very different designs, but that it is literally just what is in the home. That this is that everybody's very aware that this is actually the number one game console in the home in Japan at that time. Now, so I think that once this is coming out in the Coinop magazines in September of 84, then it doesn't matter anymore when you get to winter CES that they're, already talking about it. But by this point, they've had enough time as Coinop operators to get used to this idea. And everybody listening to this, you already heard the headlines. One of our headlines is Coinop goes cartridge. This idea of the cartridge, the interchangeable software model that we've been talking about for a while in Coinop, is finally going to hit pay dirt in a real substantial way with Versus, less so with Sente, and that idea of, it's cheap enough so we don't really care that there's a console version, only really can become acceptable if the console's not even on the horizon at the time that the Coinop operators are buying the hardware. I think that probably, in my opinion, would have been the biggest consequence. They probably would have undercut themselves had they shown it 6 months earlier.
I would just doubt that was a primary concern, because I think that Nintendo of America wanted to move to being a consumer company, and that they were getting big on the Game & Watch. Then obviously it wasn't going great for them, but I think that's what they wanted to do. But anyway, that's just my opinion.
Some people in the company may have wanted to, but Japan was bigger on that than the American company, because of course they still had Frank Ballou there, and Frank Ballou is the reason there was a Super Mario Brothers arcade game, because Like Japan,
Yeah, I'm not saying...
I realize this is a year later, but Japan wasn't going to do a Super Mario Brothers arcade game, and Frank Blue was like, we have to have one, and kind of made them do it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they were eager to abandon the coin-op thing, because, you know, the thing is that Nintendo, was going to roll into another Department of Corrections later, but, like, Arakawa continued to show up at these coin-op shows, which you would think would be like, you know, if he was like, it's too small time for me, then he wouldn't even be there. But they seem to like being in the coin-op industry more than they liked the limelight that the consumer industry shined on them.
Yeah.
At least, you know, some people in the company. But that's just my opinion.
Sure.
But we will roll into the full Department of Corrections for August 1984. I hope you have not tampered with any of your cameras lately, Carl.
Wait, you know about the cameras?
Of course, we're the state.
Oh. Okay, I promise to delete the hard drives.
That's what we don't want you to do, Carl. We're collecting. Because we need to know everything about you.
Oh, you mean the cameras that are pointed at me? Oh, yeah, okay, that's not a problem.
All right. Well, investigation's pending. But first on the docket, we have the note here says Namco is using the trade name at the time. I presume this has something to do with Namcot, the home subsidiary. Yeah. It must have been talked about back then. Again, it has been a long time, folks. Right. But I believe that you were unsure if Namco was using the name at the time, and they were. From the very beginning of their home, their Famicom stuff. It might have even been in their earlier computer game stuff, but I just don't know off the top of my head. But Namcot was there as soon as they had Galaxian and Pac-Man and all those, and Xevious and all that.
Very
gotcha.
Good.
Then you corrected this a little bit, but I just wanted to highlight that Game Machine, the magazine, was put out by Onitama, otherwise known as Onion Software, who worked with Masami Akagi, the original editor of Game Machine, to put those all on the web. So big shout outs to him. I know him personally. Good guy.
Yeah, that's been revelatory, even though the language barrier is still there a little bit. That's been phenomenal having all of those issues out there.
Then PowerPC. I believe that Carl said something about it being from the 80s, but PowerPC was first put together in 1991.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have said the 80s for the PowerPC.
Maybe you said it was too late, but either way,
it was definitely too late.
You have no idea what you said in this episode, Carl. You can't say anything with certainty at this point.
Well, I'm sure that PowerPC, I probably said something along the lines of they should have been thinking of this way earlier. But yeah, that's another issue entirely, and I have no idea what I said anymore. So let's move on.
I'm sure that Alex said something about, that it served as the basis for the generation of consoles of the Xbox 360 and whatnot. So
that's true.
He got that in.
And for anybody listening to this way, way later and just going through the archive episode after episode, I am so sorry that this DOC is completely uninformative. Okay, please continue.
I had to school Jimmy Mayer about that on the Digital Antiquarian, where
yes,
he said something about the PowerPC, and it's like nothing ever really happened with the PowerPC, and I had to actually him. It's like there are a lot of video game consoles that use that thing.
Then there discussion about animated shows, as Carl often gets off into, and I had to note that Transformers is basically an anime. It was made by Japanese production studios, and it was based on Japanese toys. Transformers is basically an anime.
Well, it's an anime, but with U.S. written scripts.
Yeah.
Which changes the tone of it. They would have never produced this. Now, if you want to see what transforming robot toys done by anime is, There is an anime based off of some of the toys that would later become Legos with the GoBots, I mean. So where the character Fightor is like the main character and teams up with some humans and is a good guy as opposed to a bad guy, and it got big airtime in France. And I've seen a couple of episodes of it, and it is weird. It is just straight up anime weird. So what I'm just saying is, it's anime from a stylistic, artistic standpoint, from the drawings and everything else, but script-wise, it is still straight-up U.S. writing.
Yeah,
is where I'd argue against calling it an anime. Now, the later, some of the later series, like Armada and stuff, there you might be able to get a better anime argument going. Sorry.
Okay, then...
And then, of course, we have the best Transformers series of all time, Transformers Animated. And I will die on that hill.
Oh, you're not one of those Beast Wars guys, okay.
No. I never... I'm sorry, but no. Transformers Animated, that's the series. It's so pretty. Okay.
And then I believe that there's something said about Nintendo getting out of Coinop in Japan. That doesn't happen until 1985. Right around the end of 1985 is when they just stop doing releases there, and they only support the stuff for the U.S.
Yeah, it's been way too long. So, I mean, we may have misspoken because I don't even know. But we might have just been foreshadowing it, being like because at this point, I think they're already preparing for a non-Coinop future, but obviously they haven't pulled the plug yet. But I don't know exactly what we said because it was months ago.
Yes, and now we can stop bringing that up because I think we brought it up enough. There was another thing where you were discussing about the kind of computer cafe deal, some business where you could go in and pay to use computers, and you were comparing it to the PC bong, in Asia and whatnot. I would say the big difference between that model of the computer cafe and the PC bong is on the PC bong you have accounts. I think that would be the big dividing line between those two models. Rather than just using computer time, you have an account bound to you that you use specifically, and you would be able to get on MMOs and RTSs and all that stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and the model that we were talking about here were actually coin-operated home computers. Yeah, right. So you actually had to keep throwing coins in this, like on an old payphone. And if you stop putting in the coins, it just stopped. So yeah, this was not going to be a viable model.
Then we have the 16-bit upgrade to the 6502. Carl called it the 65801, but that is not correct. There is an 802, but the 16-bit upgrade is called the 65C816.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I know there's a couple of different variants of that. I can't remember what was in the C64 Super CPU add-on card, but yeah.
All right. Then we just must acknowledge Carl did fix it, but there was an overlap in editing in the last episode, in the last 1984 episode, so I pointed it out to him and he fixed it.
Yes. And it happens sometimes when there's so many files too.
As any good representative of the Department of Corrections should. You corrected.
Exactly.
Yes. Not that we can fix you, Carl, but we'll have to leave that to another jump. For we are done with August 1984. I'll see you again for September 1984.
94.
No, we're going to do that
too. August 94.
I exist within this continuum, the 84 continuum, and then we have the other me that exists in the 1994 continuum.
You mean the one that's not making George Orwell jokes the whole time?
That one.
Okay. I'm looking forward to seeing that one again. Okay. Ethan, as always, thank you for your service.
Indeed. Yeah, that was an interesting discussion about how things would have changed for Nintendo if they had been at the CES. I wish I could remember the original episode well enough, to really engage in that conversation more now, to be honest. But I agree with you that I think that the Coinop situation would have been very complicated. And I doubt that's what was driving their decision-making, but I do think the Coinop situation would have become very complicated if they had started showing that home system that much earlier, with it being so similar to the VS games.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's... Granted, maybe Coinop in the United States was so desperate at that point, it didn't matter that there was a console. They just needed something. But I think that they really, really would have taken poorly to, oh, wait a sec. We're supposed to put this out here, spend a ton of money, and then you're going to sell the same exact hardware we just spent a couple grand on for $200? Seriously? It would have felt a little awkward.
For sure.
Okay. Now, all that is done, let's turn on the time machine. And not head back 40 years, not head back 50 years. We need to head back 60 years to September of 1964. Oh, wait, I probably should have looked up. What was the big song in September of 1964?
Beatles song.
Any suggestions?
It would have to be a Beatles song of some kind.
Let's see, for top hits. Let's see, I'm real-time Googling. Yeah. Let's see, in mid-September 1964, I'm Into Something Good by Herman's Hermits.
Yeah.
Was the top song in the U.S.
Something tells me I'm into something good. I know the music of that era.
Yeah. Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison almost made the top 40 in September.
Stone Cold classic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Wait, let's see. I got a top 40 list. Pretty Woman was number 11 in mid-September. Okay, cool. Why did it, this is the AI generated. Of course it's a nonsense. We got the Kinks with You Really Got Me, Honeycombs, Have I the Right, Four Seasons, Ragdoll. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So the Supremes, Jim Reeves, Dave Barry, Marianne Faithfull. Ooh, The Crying Game by Dave Barry. Okay. Let's see. Dean Martin, Everybody Loves Somebody. It was number 15. I love that song. Okay, good. So we got this. You've hummed it for us, and we've got it. So,
all right,
let's turn on the time machine. We're there. Welcome to September of 1964. Alex, what's our first headline?
Well, our first, and I must say only headline, Carl, is Libraries of the Future are online.
The UNIVAC division of Sperry Rand Corporation has programmed a UNIVAC 490 computer at the World's Fair Library USA exhibit in New York to reproduce on-demand reading lists and or essays on 75 different subjects. They ran demonstrations showing how librarians in St. Louis, 1,000 miles away, were able to query and receive 700-word printed reports in just 20 seconds.
20 seconds, but I want it now.
This is a report from Popular Electronics magazine, and I'm sure that there are examples of this going on or earlier, but the fact that they're showing this off is giving a really cool insight into what these machines are actually capable of doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is right on the cusp of when time sharing is just about to explode in higher education. The Dartmouth time sharing system, it has either just come online or is just about to come online this same year. And this is kind of right at the beginning of a more connected world via computers.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, an important view that we're shifting away from computers as machines for doing calculations or just keeping track of basic information and really being machines that can be repositories of large amounts of data.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then, of course, we're going to screw that all up by letting an AI throw out garbage. Yay! Okay. So, excellent. Now, let's turn on the time machine and move forward 10 years to September of 1974. And here we do have a sound effect, so.
Yep.
1974.
You'll talk to the computer.
After the eyes flash.
Welcome to September of 1974. Alex, what's our first headline?
Well, it's a big one, Carl. Atari buys Key.
Atari Incorporated has purchased competitor Key Games. Nolan Bushnell of Atari is now the chairman of the joint company, and Key's Joe Keenan will be president.
That's right. As our longtime listeners know, of course, Key Games was a secret subsidiary / public competitor of Atari. There had already, which we covered in other jumps, been some back and forth where they had some trade spats, where Atari did some investment and all of that. But now they are purchasing the company outright because Atari is not doing well, Carl. And it turns out that most of the best people are at Key Games. Joe Keenan is a much better day-to-day manager than Nolan Bushnell. Alan Alcorn had been forced to take a leave of absence and was no longer the head of engineering at Atari. So Steve Bristow was a much better game engineer at Key. He had also hired Lyle Raines as a fresh graduate who was a really talented game engineer. And so it turned out that they had drained away all of the best talent to Key, had brought in a new executive group, mostly from Hewlett-Packard at Atari proper, that didn't know how to run a coin-op company. And they found themselves in a position where they really had to bring Key Games and Joe Keenan in-house in order to survive.
Wow. See, I didn't know that part of it. I thought it was just an issue of, they didn't need to pretend anymore that they were two separate companies. So they just decided to merge them. But yeah, now that you're mentioning all that talent, it makes perfect sense that they had to bring them back in because that would have been a problem. Now, at this point in time, 74, how far along are the plans to go to some kind of home device that's more complex than just a Pong machine?
No, there's nothing at all along those lines yet.
Okay.
They haven't even started really. I mean, the home Pong must be in development by now, obviously, because they're going to show it at Toy Fair at the beginning of 75. But it was really at the beginning of 75, from the recollections of everyone involved. We don't have documentary evidence, but from recollections, it was really the beginning of 75 when the Grass Valley folks and the engineering folks at Atari were really starting to contemplate that VCS future.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that played a role in it. But it makes sense also just
really
for the arcade.
It really was that the company Atari was on the verge of collapse, like actually going into bankruptcy, and the head of international sales, Ron Gordon, who was a contractor, he saw the golden goose about to die because he was making good money off of being the contractor for the foreign sales. And so he basically came in. It's not entirely clear whether he was ever officially named president of the company for a brief period or if he just kind of acted like the president without the title. But he basically came in, fired all of the HP people because Nolan is bad at firing people, got Al Alcorn back in from his leave of absence, and also said that we've got to merge Key back into Atari. So, yeah, it was all because of the financial woes of the parent company.
Gotcha. Okay. So we've got that part of the industry worked out. Let's see what's going on in the home front.
Absolutely. Not much at this time, but we do have one headline: Fred introduced in PCC.
The People's Computer Company newsletter ran an excerpt from an article from August of 74 issue of Computer called A Practical Low-Cost Home/School Microprocessor System. The article was by Joe Weisbecker of RCA Laboratories. The machine that he describes is called Fred, or Flexible Recreational and Educational Device, and it's based on RCA's COSMAC microprocessor and could sell for under $500. The basic system calls for the COSMAC chip, 1024 bytes of RAM, a simple hex keyboard, an audio cassette player, and the user's TV set, and the system would be supported by software libraries on cassette tape, similar to the way record players are supported with records. Options such as card punch reader or even the ability to record software onto cassette would vastly improve the system's capabilities at little additional cost.
Yeah, Joseph Weisbecker is a fascinating individual that we don't know nearly enough about because he died in 1990, so much before anyone was really starting to take an interest in video game history, though Kevin Bunch of Atari Archive has done extensive research in this over the last few years, both by talking to Weisbecker's family and by going into the RCA archives and getting what he could out of there, and talking to some of Weisbecker's coworkers at the RCA labs as well. But he was just a real evangelist, going way back, even into the 60s, a real evangelist of the spread of computer literacy and the spread of computing for both education and recreation, as the Fred system says. And when the microprocessor came along, he knew he wanted to do something with a microprocessor and a game system, which could also have an educational component. And he spends the greater part of the 1970s trying to figure out what that could be and trying to get some division in RCA interested in this. So this is one version of the Fred. There was also an arcade machine in 1975. There was a version of the Fred that would have had interchangeable cartridges in 75 as an arcade machine.
Damn.
There were stripped down video game versions. And of course, the one that he was finally able to get somebody to make is what became the Studio 2. And it's so sad because the main memory of the Studio 2, justifiably so, with it coming out when it did at the beginning of 1977, feels so much more primitive than even the Fairchild Channel F, let alone the Atari VCS that comes just a few months later. And so it's just remembered as this kind of sad footnote. But really, the reason is he had all the pieces in place by 1974 to do something like this. And if it had come out in 74 with all of those bells and whistles, that would have been something. So he's a real pioneer, but ends up becoming a footnote just because he died before most people took an interest, and because his main legacy is the Studio 2, which was just not out at the right time compared to the systems on the market in 77.
Oh, definitely. There's also the COSMAC ELF, which is based around the same architecture. I contacted Computer Magazine at computer.org. It's the magazine of the that one big computer association, and they actually released the whole article onto the website.
Oh, wow. That's phenomenal.
Upon my request. A link is in the show notes. It's a very extensive article. It gives all sorts of interesting details about how he envisions the use of the device. And the different functionalities. So if you're interested in that, it's a wonderful time capsule because what's printed in People's Computer Company is a page and a half of it. But this is like, I think it's a 10-page article. It really goes into depth. So that's up there and visible at least for a short period of time. They told me in the email that they sent me that they're working on releasing a huge chunk of the Computer Magazine archives which are still locked away. It's an ongoing project, and so they had this immediately available. I mean, literally within 24 hours, they did this. So the files are scanned and ready to go. It's just a question of they don't know how they want to release them yet.
Well, that's great to hear, because that would be another bonanza to be able to dig back through that. Always looking for more periodicals, especially from the 1970s when things are still so murky in a lot of places, though they've come a long way in the last decade or so.
Yeah. Also, I found there was a panel discussion. I think it was the Video Game History Foundation, and Weisbecker's daughter was one of them. And he had gotten her to do a bunch of programming for the Fred concept. And some of her software then later got released for the Elf and for the Studio 2. So that's also going to be in the show notes, and it's very interesting how she talks about the system and so forth.
Yeah, and shout out once again to Kevin Bunch, who's not part of the VGHF, but is certainly friends with those people and is the person most instrumental in kind of getting a lot of this out there and making contact with her and you know, done a lot of service to kind of pull Weisbecker's work a little more into the light.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. Very, very interesting guy. Oh my God. Okay, but enough of the 70s. We're here for the meat of the episode, and that's September of 1984.
Worldwide electronic violence. 1984. Custody collapse.
An awful lot of product that was inferior.
Welcome to September of 1984. Alex, what's our first headline?
Well, Carl, things are still bad in the video game industry, but that doesn't mean things are bad for everything related to children's entertainment as toy stocks rally.
While video games keep crashing, traditional toy stocks have seen their value rally. According to Merrill Lynch's list of 100 stock categories, toy stocks have been in the top 15 no fewer than 14 times over the last 19 weeks. According to Standard & Poor's, toy orders have been running 115% ahead of a year earlier levels for the first 15 months of the year. 15 months of the year. No, for the first 15, I think, weeks of the year. Sorry.
That would make sense.
A market research firm estimates that video game retail sales plunged 54% in the first quarter of 1984, and video games are now only 21% of total toy sales as opposed to 34% a year ago. The San Diego Union-Tribune warns, though, that many of the stocks are not for the faint of heart, as Tonka, riding high on its GoBots line, has seen its debt balloon from $1 million to $8 million, and Coleco is caught between Cabbage Patch Kids and video game losses. The Christian Science Monitor reports, though, that Hasbro has booked $100 million in orders, the largest pre-booking of any non-electronic toy in the industry's history for Transformers, even though the company says they'll only be able to ship about $75 to $80 million worth this year. Much of this is due to video games having gotten consumers used to much higher prices for quote-unquote toys, and more expensive Transformers items such as their top-of-the-line $22 items seem reasonable in comparison with formerly $39 cartridges.
You know, that's an interesting connection that I'd never really thought of before, but it makes so much sense because you do. I mean, we've talked all the time about these, toy lines coming in. We don't have to repeat that. But, it's not just that you have all these action figure lines. You do have Transformers, which have some bigger, more complicated characters, the Optimus Primes and Soundwaves of the world. And you also have, the big play sets and the bigger vehicles that have come from all across all of these toy lines as well, from Star Wars to Masters of the Universe to G.I. Joe, etc. And, I think that's one thing. Like, there were action figure lines in the 70s, such as they were. They weren't as popular as the 80s action figures, but there were some. But it feels to me that you didn't have so much the larger vehicles and the play sets before the Star Wars toys. And, of course, that is about the same time, not the early Star Wars toys, but by the time most of this is coming out, that is after video games have kind of redefined a little bit what the price point of a toy can be. And I think that's a fascinating insight there.
Oh, definitely. And it really is true. And it's something where if you go back a few years here in the podcast, when video games really started to enter the toy business, we talked about it 3-4 years ago on the show, how there was consternation among the toy retailers, how much of an investment should I make in this? Does it really pay off for me to carry the hardware? Should I just carry the software, et cetera, et cetera? Because these items were so damn expensive. I mean, certain bigger toy retailers may have had some bicycles in the back, but there was never anything even close to the cost of a VCS in their inventory. And what we're seeing here, if you look, for example, at the first year of Masters of the Universe, and I went back and looked at the prices on this. The first year, I believe the price of Castle Grayskull was $19. The big playset. Yeah. But when you look at it, it's fairly simple.
It is, yeah.
For this Christmas, though, you're getting Snake Mountain, which now has some electronic elements in it. It has a lot more stuff.
And the puppet.
And the was there a puppet in it? Oh, yeah, the thing that pops out. Or was that the Fright Zone? That was the Fright Zone had the puppet.
The Fright Zone had the puppet that came out. Wasn't the Snake in Snake Mountain also some kind of puppet? I know which playset you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
No puppet in this one. That is.
But it had the wolf that you talked into that was the voice alteration thing. But the thing is, this thing is retailing for $40.
Right.
Which, I mean, there's no real justification for double the price of Grayskull, but they can get away with it. Mm-hmm. It's almost like in the first year they were like still thinking of the normal pricing mechanism, and now they're just like, well, let's see how far we can push this. I mean, they're going to go even further with the Eternia playset later on, which is just bananas. And that's going to be around the same time that the G.I. Joe flag
right. A coffee table released as a toy, essentially.
Exactly. But this insight that they're talking about, people are just used to higher prices. They're expecting to have to drop more money on the kid's birthday. Yeah. I mean, 3 years ago, they got him a VCS. A year or so ago, they got him a home computer. Well, this year, we're dropping another hundo, and it's going to be whatever toy line the kid's into this year, the whole set.
Exactly. And, I also do think this is, I'm not entirely certain about this, but I feel pretty confident. I mean, this is when the big chains like Toys R Us are really starting to hit their stride of biggest success as well. And there's more and more displacement of the old mom and pop toy stores, and a toy store like Toys R Us they can afford to take on more and more of the more expensive inventory as well, which mom and pop stores just can't, because the toy business has always been very low margin. And even in the video game business, we talked about this in our Crash episode, like it was actually a very small part of the toy business by percentage of toys, because it was mostly the bigger stores that were getting into it, but it was an outsized portion of the revenues. Like per unit, it was very small, but it was an outsized amount of the revenues. And that, which I think also drove the growth of the larger chains. And so you have a consumer that is more used to buying bigger toys for sure, but you also now have the establishment of these really big mega toy stores that can also afford to stock all of these huge lines of toys.
Exactly. And I mean, those big hallways in a Toys R Us back then, I mean, you just walked through it forever, it felt like. And, and there's so many toy lines coming online all at once. it's just this massive flood. I mean, everything from, you got the Strawberry Shortcakes, the Care Bears, the Rainbow Brights. I mean, it's just this massive, massive wave after wave after wave of stuff hitting the market.
And Thundercats, and yeah, we're in my childhood now, baby.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Silverhawks and Thundercats are coming a year or two later, but
still, they're not here yet in '84. But I mean,
no,
they're going to be part of this avalanche.
Oh yeah,
that's just starting right now.
Exactly.
Is all I mean,
and it's all being run by these television shows that are just your 22-minute commercials. Yep. And it's insane, and it's giving you that multimedia experience. Multimedia, a keyword that we're going to come back to again a little bit later. That is just creating a whole different expectation for involvement and interactivity, if you will, between the kids and the properties.
Absolutely. Turning our attention then to Coinop news, though, really with some overtones of what's coming in the home, perhaps in the near future, as Nintendo preps for cartridge future.
In late August, Nintendo held a dealer meeting at its Seattle headquarters to let them know that the future belongs to quick change carts and that more Versus games were on the way. And yeah, and this is a big trend. I mean, they're the cover of Replay magazine. It's got Arakawa, Baloo, and several other key staff members at Nintendo.
Stone and Judy, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And they're in this really nice library, and Baloo is pulling a book off the shelf. And in the middle of the library is one of the sit-down Versus cabinets. For those not in the know, the Versus cabinets was basically an NES or Famicom as an arcade cabinet when you could just exchange the cartridges in it as an operator, and it had 2 screens, so you could actually play 2-player games against one another, I believe, was the whole premise.
Right.
And but it had the 2 screens, and so it's a very big deal, and obviously because of the arcade crash, because the Coinop operators are doing so poorly, anything that allows them to change out the games and on the cheap is something that they're looking for.
Absolutely.
They also report that Sente, that was Nolan Bushnell's company that went broke, that was also working on basically this concept, is back after all the buying and selling of the company and is prepping more games for the October AMOA Expo. And several other companies will be jumping into the easy-to-change cart-based hardware arena. So the AMOA, when we report on that in a month or two, that'll be interesting to see what comes out of it.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, the rest of the industry is still kind of there, even if only barely, and Williams enters new production year with caution.
After the traditional summer break, Williams' factory has reopened, but cautiously. Company president Mike Stroll said that they currently have no inventory of machines and will only produce what is actually ordered. The current lineup is a gun game called Turkey Shoot, a pinball game called Starlight, and a baseball video game called Pennant Fever.
Yeah, I mean, we're really in the nadir right here for the American industry. So this approach makes all sorts of sense because there's just such backup in the market that, especially since Williams hasn't really embraced this kit thing yet, or the system hardware thing yet, they can't afford to create a bunch of expensive upright cabinets that then nobody ends up taking.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because there is, I believe it's in Playmeter magazine, there were apparently some very, very nasty letters sent to one of their reviewers, because they do run these reviews of the machines, and it's not just, is this game fun? It's, is this going to get a good return on investment? And the reviewer was giving very, very low scores to some of these machines that were being sold as standalone cabinets as opposed to mod kits. And they had to defend themselves saying, hey, don't blame me, because what's happening is you guys are selling it as a standalone cabinet, and then 3 months later you are selling a mod board. And guess what? I just told people, and he quotes from his article, is like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that they're going to do what they did with the last 3 games. Just wait for the mod board. And that's why if you buy it right now as a standalone, bad ROI. And so, yeah, that's really that transition. Not everybody's done it yet, but they're going to have to.
Yep.
And you're right. Everybody is there. There's rumors of company closures that seem to be rampant. There's a rumor that Taito USA might be closing down, and Atari had to tell Replay that they are not closing down operations. Atari Games, we should clarify, it's not Atari Tremel Atari, the corporation. It's Atari Games, the Coinop operation, which is still a Warner subsidiary.
Well, yeah, and to make things more complicated, this is Atari Games Incorporated, not the later Atari Games Corporation, as well.
Yeah.
Shenanigans.
Exactly. And Atari is even gearing up for the release of Return of the Jedi. They've got the back cover of one of the 2 issues of Replay this month with a close-up of Darth Vader and the line, quote, "They spent millions at the box office. They'll spend millions in the cash box."
I believe Replay is monthly. It would be the only back cover. It's Play Meter.
You're right.
It's Play Meter that was twice a month at this time.
You're right. This is a Replay. And if you've ever played the Return of the Jedi arcade game, you know that isn't really true. Have you ever played it?
No, but
Oh, it's terrible.
I've heard tell.
It's not good. It's really, really not good. After Star Wars was amazing, Empire Strikes Back as a mod kit was okay. Return of the Jedi is such a step backward. It's so bad. But oh well. Yeah.
All righty. Meanwhile, more bad news for Coinop as Coinop revenue hit over drinking age laws.
The U.S. federal government has launched its campaign against drunk driving by making federal highway funds dependent on states raising the legal drinking age to 21. Only 23 of the 50 states have a drinking age of 21, and an estimated 1,200 lives could be saved by raising the age. This has impacted revenues at bars, though, the main source of revenue for many coin men.
I'm sorry, I know this is about the coin-op industry and video games, but this just makes me think of that awful precedent of South Dakota v. Dole that's going to come out of this, that is basically giving our current president the idea that he can use federal funds in any way he wants to coerce other entities.
I loved your little Freudian slip there of precedent and president. Yes. From a legal standpoint, this is an extremely contentious issue. Especially coming at this point in history, with, Reagan being president, blah, 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 blah. But this is still one of those Congress actually acting like Congress and having the power of the purse as opposed to delegating that because of a cult. But okay.
Which reminds me, Carl, as I said I did listen to that Dig podcast on WGBH, which has another example of Congress actually being Congress in a very different time.
Yes. For anybody who hasn't listened to it, there's an amazing podcast called The Big Dig, or just The Dig. Can't remember. I think it's The Big Dig.
The Big Dig, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a follow-up to it on the same feed called Scratch and Win, which is about state lotteries in the United States. Both of them extremely good journalism, extremely entertaining, and also very, very insightful. Highly recommend them. Take a listen.
Absolutely.
But yes, wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah,
but just to get back to this story, I mean, this is a big deal here because there's going to be a real turn then in putting gambling games like poker games in bars rather than traditional video games. That's happening kind of right at this same time. That's going to mostly push traditional video games out of bars. And I'm sure the fact that the drinking age is raising to 21, you're not going to have 18 and 19-year-old kids in there anymore, is a big part of why that transition happens and why you find amusements outside of the occasional pinball and, once it comes out, Golden Tee Golf in every bar. But you're going to find, video games just out of bars now when, Pong debuted in a bar. Like, video games were huge in bars. Even after arcades became big, they were still a big part of the bar trade too. And at this point, it's going to be wiped out, and there's a few reasons for that. The crash is one, the video poker machines is another, but I'm sure the drinking age change is a third.
Oh, yeah, and the Replay magazine talks about this, how such a tremendous percentage of street locations are bars. And because many of the coin men are not just putting video games in there, they're also running the cigarette machine. They've just had a deregulation, so now they can also run pay telephones that are not just from the telephone company. So there's a bunch of ads for, buy a pay telephone as long as there's a telephone line, blah, 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 blah. So you have all these different devices that the coin operators can put into these bars. Losing video games as one of those is obviously not something that they're looking forward to. And to your point about the gambling games, the video poker machines and so forth, there's a ton of laws running, and I've consciously decided not to cover those on the show because it just veers a little too far off, and it goes into all these other regulations, and all of 50 states are doing something different. It just got way too complicated. I decided to leave it out, but so many stories every month for the last 2 years about which state is voting on it, which states put restrictions, which state is going to allow video lottery, because the coin operators, especially in the crash, are so hoping that this is going to be their next savior. Indeed. And in most of the states, it's not going to be allowed.
Absolutely. Then turning our attention very briefly to the Far East, Tower of Druaga gets write-up in Supersoft.
Japanese game mag Supersoft magazine has a one-page write-up about Tower of Druaga, explaining how it is a new experience in coin-op rescue games with treasures to find and weapons to use.
Yeah, Druaga is a big deal, and it's not necessarily very well known in the West. It's one of the primary direct inspirations for Legend of Zelda, for one thing. But even beyond that, this is a game that introduced the idea, well, it didn't introduce because Xevious kind of did it first, but it expanded upon the idea of secrets within a game and having to scour levels completely to find all of the secrets to be able to even beat the game. Even getting out of the levels was difficult. And I'm quite positive that outside of even just, being an inspiration on Legend of Zelda, I think the idea in Japanese console games like Super Mario Brothers as well, that you would have secrets to discover, really comes out of the fascination that grew up out of Druaga, because these were hard, and these were hard secrets to discover. They were very obscure, and kids would actually maintain huge notebooks next to the game machines where anybody that found something would, kind of write in, this is a thing I found on this level. If you go here and do this, you'll get this kind of thing. And it was also a time when the Japanese coin-op industry was in a bit of a doldrums as well. And so the only players that were in the arcades, for the most part, there's exceptions always, but were the super, super hardcore players. And since there wasn't, in a lot of smaller locations, there wasn't a lot of demand, not huge throngs of people around the machines, they could actually spend lots and lots of time, these groups of players, kind of uncovering these secrets. And some of the first important fan game magazines, Game Freak, which is, where the Pokemon people came from, kind of grew out of this culture of discovery that Druaga was kind of inaugurating. So since we don't have a lot of good sources in English for what's going on in Japan, and we don't get to touch on the Japanese market as much, I just wanted to take advantage of this opportunity when we're talking about Druaga to just kind of talk a little more about how hugely important it is in the way that video games develop in Japan in the 8-bit console era.
Exactly. And this is also why I wanted to build it in, because this is just huge. I mean, it's right at the start of the magazine. It's got a bunch of images. It breaks down the different enemy types and everything. It's clearly something that they've recognized as being very, very special. Mm-hmm. And you look through the rest of the magazine, it's, a lot of home computer games, some NES talk, and so on and so forth. This is kind of the only thing from the arcades that's mentioned this time around. Yeah. And so, it does give you that feeling of, okay, there's not much going on in the arcades. This thing is, though, something very, very special.
Absolutely. And with that, we turn our attention away from the Coinop space and over to what remains of the console industry, where the Save the 7800 campaign has started.
Computer Entertainer and Video Game Update newsletter is trying to organize a grassroots letter-writing campaign to save the Atari 7800. The stock of the console that the newsletter reviewed a few months back is rumored to be sitting in an Atari warehouse, and as the last great hope for the console market, fans are encouraged to write to Atari and call them to let them know that they want the new next-gen console.
I just want to say, Carl, one time in the history of everything, a fan letter writing campaign worked to save Star Trek. And ever since then, folks of a nerdier persuasion always seem to think that because it worked that one time, it can work again. And it has never worked again. I'm sure you can point me to some tiny thing somewhere where somebody changed their mind, but big picture things never worked again.
All I have to say is, and this is the reason why we should never do it again, Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Oh, God. Touché, sir. But yeah,
it took 50 years, but yes, it worked a second time, and it was not good.
Touché. But yeah, it is true though. I mean, it really it's a tradition that dates back to Star Trek, and it never really works. And it was doubly not going to work in this case because it didn't matter if they got 1 million letters. And I'm sure they didn't.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't matter if they had, because retailers were like, okay, and where am I going to put them? With all the other crap we have from you in this store. If you take all that other crap back, maybe I can find some space for it. It's not even the right market to be, trying to convince. Because, I mean, not that, and quite frankly, Trammell did want to release it, and he couldn't because there was a patent dispute. He would have released it if not for, or not a patent dispute, but a royalty dispute between General Computer Corporation and Warner and Atari Corporation, and who had to pay General Computer Corporation for the remaining unpaid bills for the work that they did. Or he would have released it. And of course, they couldn't have known that. But even if it had released in 84, it still would not have moved the market very much in 1984, because the market is still just crushed under all of that old inventory.
I completely agree with you. The U.S. market just cannot bear that weight at this point. And and let's face it, Jack's focus on computers at this point would have meant that even if they had released it, more or less would have just been a dumping of inventory.
Yeah, it would have been to make a quick buck because, I mean, the VCS stayed on the market, and they did nothing with the VCS. I mean, it sold. They sold units in 84 and 85, but they did nothing to advertise it. They did nothing to push it. And they probably wouldn't have done anything to push the 7800 either because, first of all, Jack was always adverse to marketing. He never believed in it. And second of all, he was so focused on the computers. Now, he would have released it if not for the financial dispute with General Computer Corporation. He really did want to release it in 84. But like you said, he would have just released it into a dead market, and I don't think he would have done much to try to push it and actually get consumers to buy it. It would be more like, if I can make a quick couple of bucks to support the computer business by putting these on the market, why not? You know?
Free up space in that warehouse, and that's about it. But
exactly.
Oh well.
But General Computer Corporation is not the only sticky deal that Trammell has inherited at Atari Corporation, as Atari is also renegotiating a Lucasfilm deal.
Atari's much vaunted deal to co-develop and publish games by George Lucas's Lucasfilm Games division is being renegotiated by the new Trammell-led Atari management. This follows the uncertain future of the Atari 7800, which the games Rescue on Fractalus and Ball Blazer were supposed to also appear on. As it stands, the 5200 versions may be the only ones to get a release.
And, and once again, I mean, I'm sure Jack Trammell wouldn't have minded releasing something from Lucasfilm Games, all else being equal in the world, but Jack Trammell has no money at this point. He bought Atari for debt. The idea was that he would go collect receivables that were owed to Warner Atari in order to finance his next moves at Atari Corporation. He has been unable to collect the majority of those receivables because market crash. There are no receivables to collect. The inventory is still sitting in bargain bins. And so he really, I mean, Jack always has a reputation of being cheap and cutting costs to the bone. And, there's that element of Jack. But this is one of those times where, on top of that general reputation, he just literally has no money to do anything. And what money he does have needs to be funneled towards that next home computer that he really wants to do.
Exactly. And we talked about those receivables in past episodes of the last couple of months. Now, the Lucasfilm games will get home computer distribution. Epix is going to get the rights for North America. Activision will get the European rights. And it's also they're going to get ported to the European systems, through the Activision subsidiary and so forth. So these games are going to have a life, and Lucasfilm Games, of course, is going to become a legendary publisher of games in their own right. It's just a really weird, rocky start.
Absolutely. But it's not just the console makers that are feeling the heat here, as the crash is reverberating up the supply chains as well, as chip maker feels video game fall.
Gould Inc., a maker of batteries and semiconductors, reported that their ROM chip business has collapsed after undisclosed video game maker clients of theirs have canceled orders. Gould had hoped to sell $30 million worth of ROM chips in 1984, but had only sold $5 million in the first half of the year, and now the sales have effectively dropped to zero. The markets speculate that the clients in question were Activision and Atari, but Activision denied this and Atari did not comment. Gould also reported that a major computer maker had canceled a contract for RAM chips, which they would now be making themselves. Commodore is speculated to be that client, but Commodore denied the rumor. Chips account for 12.5% of Gould's business. So, yeah, Gould Electronics, it's very interesting company history.
Yep.
Gets bought and sold, moved around, blah, 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 quite a bit. But at this point in time, I mean, if 12.5% of your business simply drops to zero, I mean, you better be having some serious profit margins elsewhere to be able to handle that. Yeah, they're going to get bought out here in short order after this. How much of that's dependent on this, I don't know, but it can't be helping.
Absolutely, and it's just another sign about how the whole thing is completely falling apart and how the scale is so different. Because I know there's some people that went on to play Commodore 64 games that are like, there was never a crash because I just got a Commodore 64 and I played Impossible Mission. Little call out there. And that's great for you, but this is another example of how those economies of scale are just not the same, because it's not just the publishers, it's not just the console manufacturers, but it rolls back on the entire supply chain, and that computer business is just not as big in terms of the number of people involved, the number of companies involved, the number of games being sold, the number of the products being made. It is a big old crash.
Oh, yeah. And also just think about it. I mean, Impossible Mission in the United States is going to be sold on disc.
Yep.
Much, much cheaper medium.
Yep.
And in Europe, it's going to be sold on disc or cassette.
Yep.
Again, all these chip manufacturers are suddenly just SOL.
Exactly. They got to get their chips into Snake Mountain now. Speaking of continuing fallout of the crash, Atari Japan to close.
Atari Inc. has decided to close its Japanese operations. Atari International Nippon Inc., which was established in spring of 1983. This comes after the company has sold its assets to Atari Corporation, Jack Tramel's new operation. While Tramell did acquire the rights to Atari's international subsidiaries and Atari Japan was readying for the launch of a new game system, the management assessment has led to the decision to shutter the subsidiary. Rival Nintendo's head Hiroshi Yamauchi said, according to the Japan Economic Journal, a widened gap between Japanese and American video game makers as to hardware has led to a delay in Atari software development. Whatever that means. The journal does report, though, that a new Japanese subsidiary, Atari Far East Japan Limited, has been founded to sell coin-operated games.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what we have here is Atari, the fallout of splitting Atari. So Atari Inc. is the still existing husk. They've handed over what was supposed to be the Japanese Atari operations, which were primarily there to sell the 2600. We talked about this back in one of our 83 jumps, that they had launched the 2600 finally in 83 in Japan. Way too late, way too crappy, right before the Famicom hit. Or right after even. I can't remember if it was right around the time of the Famicom hitting.
Right.
Obviously, nobody cares. And so Jack has decided to just drop that, and that subsidiary will be closed. But obviously, a new subsidiary needs to be opened in order to keep Atari Coinop product hitting the Japanese market. And that's the Atari Far East Japan Limited. And of course, Yamauchi is just like, well, these guys didn't keep up with the hardware because their console sucks. And this means that their software is also now inferior. And that is where Nintendo will now conquer all, is how I'm interpreting this indirect quote.
I mean, my man's not wrong.
No, he is definitely not wrong as far as console games are concerned.
Well, absolutely.
You just played Impossible Mission, so you know how complex these computer games are getting. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And now we end this look at the console industry with perhaps the biggest telltale sign yet that the party is well and truly over in the United States. No mention of video games in Playthings.
For the first time since adding toy industry trade magazine Playthings to this show's sources at least 3 years ago, the monthly regional reports from toy sellers has not included a single mention of video games. And this is huge. I mean, as regular listeners of the show know, I absolutely love these regional comments, especially our man in Chicago. And this was the first time where, I mean, I think there's 6 or 7 of these people each month.
Yep.
Not a single one of them had a single word to say about home computers or video games. Nothing. It's simply not an issue for toy retailers at this moment.
Nope.
They'll be back, but...
All hail Megatron, baby.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just insane. It's all talk about, Rainbow Bright this month was the big thing. Because everybody is like, this Rainbow Bright thing is coming. Everybody's expecting it to be the next Cabbage Patch doll. And, it's, we can't get enough Transformers. When the Transformers show up, they're gone. And, it's crazy.
Turning our attention now to computer news, we start with a plea from Creative Computing saying, upgrade your PC.
Creative Computing magazine dedicates a serious number of pages to the growing trend of people upgrading their IBM PCs and discusses the plethora of add-on boards from a wide variety of suppliers currently on the market.
I don't think it's probably a secret to anyone that listens to this podcast on the regular that, of course, this is the secret sauce key to the success of the PC right here, because a basic out-of-the-box PC, it could do some business things, but certainly not a great game machine. But with add-on boards, now you're talking to this day. That is what that PC architecture is based on, is getting a processor, a motherboard, and some RAM, and then stuffing all kinds of random shit into slots.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of weird and prescient the way that the article is written. So they talk about how, your PC was really cool when you first bought it, but, that software just keeps asking for more and more stuff, and you want to more RAM for that spreadsheet, and you want to do this and you want to do that. You just got to keep upgrading. And it feels like you could have almost written the first page of that article 10 years later and just upgraded some of the numbers, and it just feels right.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, while that's what's going on in the PC space, other companies are channeling their best at Jimmy Eat World impersonation decades before the band became popular, as Commodore and Atari target the middle.
The September 3rd edition of Adweek has a great write-up about the anticipated battle between Commodore and Atari over the mid-price computer market. This news segment that would target users looking for more expensive machines with high-end graphics and sound capabilities that some think may not exist. This includes Epic's programmer Brian McGeer. But he doesn't think that there is a market of users looking for sophisticated graphics, his words, but that apparently isn't going to deter either company as they are moving forward with their GUI-based systems. Atari has supposedly sourced its next-gen hardware from an undisclosed Japanese company, while Commodore is reported to have paid $20 million for Amiga Corporation and is expected to release 2 versions of their machine, a high-end one for business users and a lower-spec machine for mass retail. Chris Mester, a spokesperson for Computerland's products division, has cast shade on the plans, though, by saying, quote, "Businessmen won't buy the Amiga because there isn't enough software. A Computerland owner isn't going to waste his time if the consumer can go next door to Toys R Us and get it in a box," end quote.
Indeed. And of course, this is a market that does become non-existent in the United States. Obviously, in Europe, it is very different, but I don't know that McGear is entirely correct that users aren't interested in sophisticated graphics. They're kind of okay with that, but users have certainly been burned by the home computer market and by what happened in that kind of 81 to 83 period when it turned out that computers really didn't have much use beyond games. Home computers, I should say, didn't have much use beyond games. And they're not necessarily going to invest in even more expensive computers just to play games with slightly more sophisticated graphics. And if they need a work computer, they're going to get a PC. And, while the PC market for gaming doesn't look great now, word is that upgrading your PC may be a viable path towards some of this in the future. And so, it's McGear is a bit prescient here. It's just not a market that's going to come together in the US.
Yeah, it's just not there. I mean, we've talked about this in other contexts, like, for example, the real use of the computer for the average person in the home comes about when you have the internet, when you have a database that is large enough to pull from. We'll be talking about database style software in a little bit here today still. And with the sophisticated graphics, the question is, what do you do with a really cool Amiga image? I mean, the printers at the time are not really capable of doing the color of that image justice. We've talked about the recently introduced Okimate 10, which for its time as a home color computer is an amazing feat, but it still does not look great. And you can't really output it. What are you going to do? Record it with a VCR? I mean, there's just no market for this yet. It's not like you're putting an image together or putting a presentation together and throwing it up on YouTube. It's just not there. But Popular Computing Weekly reports that Sam Trammell announced during an interview in Taiwan that Atari's new 16-bit computer would launch in January, with a related 32-bit machine due by April. A price of less than $1,000 for the machine, presumably the 16-bit one, might spark a new price war, seeing as IBM and Apple don't offer anything comparable for under $2,000. Atari has set up production targets for its 3 new machines between 3 and 4 million units through sites in Ireland and the Far East.
Yes, and not surprisingly, there is a bit of skepticism around all of this, and for one, Computer Entertainer doesn't believe Atari can deliver.
The Computer Entertainer in a Video Game Update newsletter reports on Atari's ambitious plans to introduce new 8, 16, and 32-bit systems at the upcoming Winter CES. While we reported on this last month, the Computer Entertainer analysis is quite interesting, as they don't buy into Trammell's ability to actually have a finished design ready to go in time for the show, given the complexity of such machines and the fact that they won't have a ready-made chipset after Commodore's purchase of Amiga. They go on to also ponder how hard it will be for a Trammell machine to enter the business market, which relies so heavily on specialty shops, the same ones that Trammell angered during his tenure at Commodore by moving the VIC-20 into mass retail at lower prices without warning. In the newsletter's estimate, and after talking to such retailers, no one seems willing to give Trammell another shot.
And they most certainly follow through on that. No one is willing. They burned their entire customer base.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you see it also in the fact that these rumors are flying that there will be a high-end Amiga and a low-end Amiga. There's going to be not just one new business-style machine from Tramiel. There's going to be one that's 32-bit and one that's 16-bit. This idea of splitting up the market and having a compatible high-end and low-end machine that's being rumored is a clear indication of where everybody at least thinks that they're going to go. Whether or not those were plans that were actually being discussed is another issue. From my research into the Amiga, at this point in time, Commodore really only has one model planned. It's going to be the Amiga. That's it. It's the high-end, very expensive machine, what will be later known as the Amiga 1000. But yeah, Atari, as we will see, there's clearly an idea that, yeah, it's going to be one core machine, but there's going to be variants with more RAM and all this other stuff. And I think that is that fear that you're going to go over to Toys R Us and simply pick one of these things up won't be the case with Commodore, because, well, Jack's not there anymore. They're going to try something completely new, which is going to fail. And Jack is probably going to try to get it into Toys R Us, but I don't think Toys R Us ever carried the ST. Just saying.
Yeah, I would doubt that. Yes.
But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah. He's burnt his bridges in the U.S. He hasn't burnt them in Europe, though. So
nope, because he doesn't have direct control over there because of the way, or didn't at Commodore because of the kind of screwy way that the company was set up. So yeah, it's still a good name over there, but I think we're going to see some challenges for Atari as we continue to follow these stories in the coming months. But while the Atari name and the Tramiel name may still have some credibility in Britain, there are other names that are beginning to lose their credibility just a little bit. And it doesn't help when Sinclair financials disappoint.
We've been talking about Sinclair's plans to go public for a while and how they've been pushed back to 1985. The company's fiscal year ended in March, and the numbers are now coming out. And boy, they are not good. While revenues have jumped considerably, 42%, from £54.5 million to £77.7 million, expenses jumped from £33.7 million to £54.9 million as hardware inventories grew from £3.8 million to £7.2 million. This left only a meager $14.28 million in profits, up only $253,000 from the year before. No worries, though, as the QL will launch via mail order in the U.S. before the end of 1984, and Sinclair expects it to sell strongly.
Yes, because a country that has the IBM PC as a business standard is really going to go gaga over the Sinclair QL. I mean, you gotta say these things to try to get the markets from completely abandoning you, but come on now.
And
come on.
I mean,
now.
And this is after as we reported, Timex has basically dropped the Sinclair line. So they no longer have the Timex name to back them up. There's not going to be a showroom where you can take a look at it. You're going to have to buy this thing in mail order. Yeah, there's no way around this. But the fact that their inventories are building up.
That's the real canary in the coal mine.
Exactly. They've put a lot of money into some hardware, and there's a lot of competition coming down that pipeline. And the good old Mr. Sugar is not going to have any of this.
Absolutely. But I suppose it's still possible that if the QL comes out with strong reviews right out of the gate in the American computing press, that it could still have a chance to make some kind of impact. So, Carl, why don't we see what happens when Byte reviews the QL.
Oh, if the British press wasn't kind to the QL, they at least tried to cheer on the home team. The ungrateful colonials, though, aren't holding back. The first page of the review is dedicated entirely to lambasting the UK industry's current penchant for releasing half-baked products, and then goes on to jump into the technology's many flaws. A major one being that the microdrives, due to the error-checking system, lose storage space over time, an effect UK reviewers noted but without citing a cause. The unreliability of the microdrive tapes, which, according to Sinclair, have been remedied, but the reviewer lost 2 of their 11 tapes during their testing period. The promised multitasking capabilities of QDOS were not implemented on the machine the tester was using, and Super Basic was, quote, very, very slow, end quote. With a 7.5 megahertz 68008, you'd think it would take some effort to run that slowly, end quote. So, no, it does not get a thumbs up even for the impoverished businessman desperate for a computer.
Yeah. Now, I mean, this was going to fail in the United States regardless. So I'm not saying that this would have solved anything because there were other problems. But how you could even try to release this machine in the United States without a proper disk drive is beyond me. I mean, the microdrive has all sorts of problems, but even if the microdrive worked better than this, there's no businessman in the U.S. that is going to settle. That's a budget solution that was required in the U.K. at the time, but just was not needed in the U.S. And I'm sure it wouldn't have been worth developing a QL disk drive just for the U.S. market, which wasn't going to be big anyway. I mean, I get that, but it's like, yeah, introducing microdrives to the U.S., I'm sorry, but see Adam/Coleco for how well that was going to turn out.
Well, and that's the weird thing. This idea of which storage media you can get away with on a budget machine ends up becoming a key factor here because, yeah, Sinclair still thinks that he has to go super cheap. The Byte article, goes into depth on hard drives, which, one halfway decent hard drive will cost you a QL. And I just made a slight change here to the order because it makes sense given what we're talking about. And then you have good old, at this point, not yet Lord Sugar, releasing the Amstrad CPC for far less than the QL, including a monitor, a built-in standard tape drive, and also an wonderful little add-on.
That's right, because at the same time, the QL is getting pilloried in the foreign press. Amstrad disk drive announced.
Amstrad has revealed their DDI-1 disk drive for the CPC 464. The 3-inch disk drive based on the Hitachi standard is a 169K double-sided disk, which will ship with a CP/M disk to use as an alternative operating system for the computer, and Dr. Logo Digital Research's Logo variant. The drive and interface will cost £199, while an additional drive, no interface needed, will cost just £159.
Yeah, I mean, in both sides of the Atlantic, because, this was a Coleco Adam thing too. Like you said, there was this question. It's like, can we really provide a serious computer that is affordable and also includes a disk drive? And the conclusion, for various reasons at the time, the Coleco that Sinclair and others made, is no. But now here comes Lord Sugar, Sir Alan, I suppose, at this time, and now he's saying, guys, I got this much better put together computer here compared to a Sinclair, and I'm giving you a disk drive as well. I mean, a little more expensive, yeah, sure, but not that much more expensive. And there's just an understanding, and this has always been the main difference between Uncle Clive and Lord Sugar is that Sugar understands that, yeah, we got to get this stuff affordable for the consumer, but we also have to give them a product that works for their needs and balance those two things.
Exactly. There's no reason to go cheap if nobody can use it. And the Amstrad CPC is getting rave reviews at this point in England because it does what it says on the tin. I mean, it's giving you the CPM. It's going to give you word processing. It's going to do all this stuff. And it's cheap by comparison with everything else. And it's got a real keyboard. It actually has a keyboard. Let's not forget that, because the QL keyboard, it's not a specky keyboard, but it ain't much better.
Exactly. And, you know, it's fine. I mean, I'm not here to denigrate anybody that enjoyed playing games on their specky, but it's fine to have some of those compromises on something that is really just meant for entertainment by a young audience. I mean, that's fine. But once you get to a business computer, even if it drives up the cost just a little bit, you have to have a reliable storage medium, and you have to have a real keyboard. It's just, it's part of the equation.
It is. Unfortunately, Sinclair, that's why he lost the contract with the BBC.
Exactly.
Because he could not deliver a machine that was going to survive people pounding away at the keyboard, kids pounding away at the keyboard in a classroom for a couple of years in a row.
Absolutely. But Lord Sugar, Sir Alan, and Amstrad are not the only game in town, because it seems Europe to get MSX'd.
The Japan Economic Journal reports that several Japanese makers of MSX-compatible computers are preparing to launch systems into the European market this holiday season. Toshiba has already finished adapting their system to European display standards and hopes to sell 100,000 units in the first year, primarily in the UK. Yamaha subsidiary Nippon Gaki Company is looking to sell 50,000 units of its quote, music computer, an MSX machine with additional outputs to link it to a synthesizer and keyboard. Sony, which has a large share of the domestic market in Japan, has reportedly completed all the preparations to deliver machines to Europe. The biggest hurdle to launches so far has been a lack of software, as Japanese software is generally considered to be derivative, making its sales into the USA and Europe difficult, but several European software houses have begun developing for MSX. The launches will also hopefully help the Japanese computer industry as a whole, as Japan's exports of personal computers have been leveling off at 250,000 units per year. Japanese manufacturers are now also beginning to eye Asian and Middle Eastern markets.
I mean, this is the logical play, and it's kind of the last chance for the MSX to become a real competitor in the marketplace. You know, the home computer wars really did make it so that the MSX consortium just missed the opportunity and missed the market in the United States, if there ever even was going to be one. By this time, the home computer market is in ruins there, and people that want more serious machines are turning to 16-bit machines. So there really is no place for an MSX anymore. Europe is still very much in the thrall of the 8-bits here. So, not just on a personal recreational level, but even in more serious business situations. And so, this is kind of the time. If they can bring in an MSX computer that is reasonably priced and has decent software, they could certainly potentially compete in the market in parts of Europe.
Definitely. And they seem to have identified the UK as the market to go after. So, and we have to also remember the European Union doesn't exist yet. The European Community has certain liberalizations regarding movement of goods, but you don't really have one market yet. You don't have one currency yet. It really is, you have to go market by market by market, which is not easy. So Popular Computing Weekly in the UK reports that a formal UK MSX launch was held at the end of September, and the 7 manufacturers present showed a myriad of systems. The 64K models would run between 280 and 300 pounds, more than they wanted, but the rising yen, we've talked about that lately, wouldn't allow for a lower price. 50 UK software houses are now committed to supporting MSX. And, I mean, this sounds good. The rest of Europe doesn't really have a software publishing industry yet. You've got a handful of companies in Germany releasing stuff, in France and so forth. You have nothing in Spain yet at all. So the UK is the one that can actually deliver some software here. And unfortunately, though, the Speccy and the MSX and the Amstrad all have the same CPU. And we're going to get a whole bunch of very lazy Speccy ports to the MSX and the Amstrad, and they're not going to necessarily be very pretty or run very well. But the titles will be there. And like you were saying, the MSX, this is like their last chance to make a mark. And it's not just that the home computer market has collapsed in the US, but technically speaking, the MSX is a previous generation. I mean, it doesn't hold a candle to a C64. So I got a great quote here, and this is from Chris McLaughlin, the spokesperson for the MSX makers in the UK. Quote, "We may either love MSX or hate it as a standard, but it's a final solution to the problem of compatibility, achieved by consensus within the majority. Nobody is standing up and saying that the Z80 is knife-edge state-of-the-art stuff. It's not necessarily the best, but it's workable, and we can build applications such as home banking and home shopping around it. The pricing side was never discussed by the MSX companies together, but originally they were hoping to produce them at around 250 pounds, but the way the yen has been going against the pound has meant the cost has had to go up." End quote.
Yeah, and I mean, that is a real problem because as you said, the software isn't really going to be there because nobody is feeling super committed to this new computer coming into an already rich UK market. It's always fine. It's like, yeah, we'll port our stuff. Why not? It's basically free money.
Yeah.
Because of the amount of effort into it, but they're not going to actually be invested in the success of this machine, and the Japanese companies themselves just don't have any killer apps to bring in that they can use as system sellers at this point. And so when you throw in the less than competitive price point as well, dictated by that pesky yen, which has been coming back to haunt us a lot in both our 30 and 40-year jumps, then this is already starting to look like a wee bit of an issue here.
Oh, definitely. Now, we've talked about this last year, but Spectra Video had a machine which was the foundation of the MSX standard. They've announced their 728, an MSX-compatible computer with 80K of RAM, which adds 16K of video RAM on top of the standard 64K of RAM, and shipment should start in October. But, this is another one of these machines where if the software doesn't take advantage of that extra RAM, who cares?
Exactly.
And this is not an upgradable system like the IBM PC. Again, it's their keyboard computer, and everybody's going to simply be programming for the lowest possible configuration. The trap that's going to grab the Atari ST, the trap that's going to grab the Amiga, and prevent those machines from growing up, while the PC is starting at a much lower level, but it's just going to slowly chug along.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the problems with creating a forced standard like this. I mean, obviously the PC or PC compatible ends up becoming a standard, but it becomes a standard organically. IBM was not trying to create a PC compatible infrastructure. It just kind of happened. But with the MSX consortium trying to create this standard, that works in VCRs because the basic functionality of a VCR is going to always be almost the same. I mean, you can add a little special mode on this one, you can add a better clock on that one, whatever, but at the end of the day, most people are like, does it play VHS tapes? Sure. Okay, fine, we're good. Because the software just stays the same. But when you create a standard like this, it does mean that everyone basically has to hew to a lowest common denominator, and nobody can get out ahead and really evolve the standard on their own. And so, yeah, it just gets caught in a trap of being obsolete almost the moment it came out, and they couldn't really do anything to address it until like 3 years later or whatever with the MSX2, which then was also immediately basically obsolete by the time it came out, and you're just never going to be able to get over that hump. And, because you have to keep all of these different companies at least somewhat in alignment.
Yeah. And I mean, I've talked about it. I've brought it up multiple times. The absolute key to the PC surviving was always the fact that the video card is just a straight up bitmap. There's no fancy, we're going to change the background line colors on a scan line basis, or we are going to have hardware sprites, or all these other things that basically allowed you to do cool effects for the time, but were never scalable or upgradable over time. And all of these machines will have some variation of that. Some hack to get around the limitations of the time, be it the color clash on the Speccy or whatever. And that's always going to lock them into a very specific moment in time. The PC doesn't have that. You can throw everything out as long as you're just dumping a whole screen into memory and then dumping it onto the monitor. Everything is okay. And yeah, and this one's using the same frickin' chip as the ColecoVision, for God's sake. So we are way, 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 way back. But the yen problem might be solvable
if European companies get on board with the program. And it does seem that Philips ready to launch MSX machine.
Dutch electronics giant Philips says it is ready to launch its MSX-compatible microcomputer. This would mark the first European machine using the standard and may beat the Japanese to market in the UK. Yeah, so here we're dealing with the VG8020. Now, actually, and this is getting reported as this in the UK weeklies, but this is the third MSX machine released by Philips in Europe, but the first to hit the UK. The previous machines were not fully MSX compliant, varying in their ports or memory configurations, and unlike the previous models, weren't made by Philips in Europe, but by Kyocera out of Japan, and just rebranded. So, and this is kind of what I was talking about, similar to the way the first Speccies were available in both 16K and 48K models. The very first MSX computers also had varying standards. But that's what Philips was importing and rebranding. But now they're actually going to launch the 8020. It's not going to last for very long on the market, but it is going to give them a foothold in Europe.
Absolutely. Turning our attention then to the one major maker we haven't talked much about yet, Commodore. +4 delays will limit supply.
Popular Computing Weekly reports that Commodore's +4 will be delayed as the built-in software packages weren't completed until August, and production of the machine was delayed in inauspicious start to a machine that in the very same issue gets its first reviews, and they aren't good.
Yeah, so, the second half of that headline could easily be, but it doesn't matter because of limited demand.
Yeah. So the links are, remember everybody, the links to all the sources are in the show notes. Reading the reviews of this machine, the weeklies do, the Popular Computing does the hardware review one week, and then the next week does the software review. And oh my God, it's so bad. What should have been an interesting idea, mainly the ability to take information from one software package and put it in the other. So you can have information from your word processor, dump it into your spreadsheet, take it from the spreadsheet, dump it into the database, and vice versa. And because they're all in ROM, it's instantaneous. I mean, we talked last month about how the Macintosh reviewed was just like, yeah, you want to go from one program to the other one. Now you've got to dump it out, load the next one off of a diskette, and all this stuff. And it was a freaking nightmare. This should solve that, except for the fact that the software is so bad and it's stuck in such a small ROM chip, and it doesn't really work. You run out of memory before you can actually do anything. And so this was supposed to be the cheap alternative for the businessman, and it's now downgraded to Grandma bought the wrong machine for Christmas? And yeah.
Indeed. But that's not the only news of sagging Commodore products in Europe, as the C16 kills the VIC-20 in Europe.
Death of the machine in the U.S. was quietly announced in September of 1983, but now the word is official for Europe as well. And this is interesting. The only reason I really left it in was the fact that the VIC-20 still had a role to play in a lot of the European markets. There's still a lot of support for it in the German magazines like Happy Computer. There's a lot of people still using this machine because it was still a fully functional machine. It had the keyboard and everything else. Then this concept of the starter computer is still alive, if you will. And the C16 is not a replacement on that. This spec-down version of the +4 hardware is not going to have the same software support as the VIC-20. It's not going to get the same support in the magazines. And it's going to be the final nail in the coffin of the quote-unquote starter computer category.
Absolutely. Could not have put it better myself. Though it's not just the starter computer category that is having trouble in the United Kingdom, as Currys gives up on PC markets.
UK retailer Currys has decided to shutter its business PC subsidiary, MicroC. The 4-year-old subsidiary, which operates 5 shops, will close immediately. Each of the stores was losing money as the market for PCs in the UK is being beset by price cutting and an increasing number of microcomputer dealers. Currys saw no way to maintain their customer service levels in a, quote, mature price-sensitive market, end quote, with ever-dwindling margins. Micro C sold serious Apple and IBM computers with prices ranging between £1,000 and £3,000 each. Curry's home computer business is still booming, though, and will not be affected by the closures.
Yep, that very unique UK market still kind of rolling along there, where, you know, as we talked about in the previous headlines and about Amstrad and everything, you need something that works, that actually works for the market, and everything is not weird like the microdrives and the Sinclair, but they're also not necessarily looking to go for the pricier business machines that are available in the United States as well. So this middle market that is failing to appear in the United States is actually going to kind of become, within short order here, the primary market in the UK. And there really isn't room for these hugely expensive machines coming from Apple and IBM.
Oh, definitely. And I guess you really see it in Europe because they don't really care about the compatibility. Nobody's taking their work home with them. That concept will simply not pick up. We've talked about all the articles that are showing up about, you know, the businessman on the go needs his portable Dell or whatever. Not Dell, Compaq. The luggable computers is something that doesn't make any sense for the European office employee. But it's something that in the US suddenly adds up a little bit more. Why Commodore makes the SX64, for example. And so if you just want to have, and I've talked about this on the show before, my general practitioner, when I was in Germany in the 90s, the entire office was decked out in Atari STs. They had like 5 networked STs, GUI interface, one hard drive with all the records on it. Perfectly okay. And would have only cost maybe the price of one decent PC at the time. So why not? And those things will just keep working because most of the software's the GUI and everything was in ROM. So there you go.
Indeed. Now turning our attention to some computer game news. We've got a big story here. Elite released.
Acorn Soft has released Elite. The Ian Bell and David Braben space epic for the BBC Micro costs £15 and comes with a 65-page manual, a control summary card, and a 50-page scene-setting novella.
I mean, this is obviously a huge moment because this is such an important landmark in open world gaming. I mean, you can certainly point to this or that here or there that was more or less open world than Elite when it came out. But as I often say on my own podcast, it's not really about who was first. It's about who was the most impactful. And Elite was really the game that started to open up the idea and the possibility that you can just drop a player in the middle of a humongous world, give them a variety of activities that they can perform, give them a vague objective of some kind to meet at the end, and then just turn them loose to play. This is a pretty big deal, this concept being popularized by Elite.
Yeah, it is the birth of the sandbox. And I mean, I did not really play this. I think I booted up a couple times on the C64, not understanding what the hell was going on. But yes, the Amiga version of this got so much play from me over the years. And it really is just, it redefines what your expectations of gaming can be. Mm-hmm. I mean, now granted, this idea of the procedurally generated fixed world is obviously not new. Pitfall did it. And just shortly before this, we had Lords of Midnight also coming out of the UK with a very expansive, living, breathing world. But yeah, like you said, there's This just drops you in and you get to decide what you want to do. There's no real fixed objective. You want to be a space pirate? Become a space pirate. You want to be a bounty hunter? Become a bounty hunter. You just want to make money moving goods back and forth? Congratulations. It's all an option.
Exactly. Yeah. Moving then from the sublime to the ridiculous, Deus Ex Machina brings multimedia home.
Game publisher Automata has released Deus Ex Machina, or Machina as they call it, a 15-pound Spectrum 48K game that combines interactive games with a fully recorded audio experience for a new kind of entertainment package. Featuring the voices of Ian Dury, John Pertwee, Frankie Howard, and E.P. Thompson. The game is loaded into the Specky and then a second audio tape is started to accompany the game. The total experience runs about 45 minutes and is frickin' bizarre.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Mel, I don't know how he pronounces his last name, Coucher. I don't know how he pronounces it, but he is a very interesting fellow.
Yeah. I mean, I watched a playthrough of this, if you want to call it that. It's basically just a series of mini games, most of which don't make any sense. I mean, at one point there's like a walking headless chicken thing, and it's bizarre, but the concept is supposed to, I mean, just the opening starts with this thing about how there's this supercomputer in the future and there's a rat dropping in it, and the rat dropping begins to evolve and becomes a new super intelligent. It's messed up. Just beyond messed up. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Just sit there and listen to this for 45 minutes and just see if you still have brain cells at the end. It's nonsense. Now, to be fair, and the experience is you're supposed to just keep playing. You can't die. You can just at the end get evaluated on how many points you had in each of the sections. But because the audio tape is running independently, right, you also can't be so good at the mini games that you finish the mini game and then move on to the next section. You're then basically stuck on the mini game until the audio tape lets you go. So
yes,
all of the downsides of multimedia that we experienced already with Laserdiscs, they're bringing that experience home, but without the cool Don Bluth animation. Yeah,
pretty much. Moving on then from multimedia to transmedia, the Mimi travels to the Apple II.
Voyage of the Mimi, a new PBS educational series following the adventures of a group of kids learning about science while on a schooner, will be accompanied not just by written materials and teacher guides, but also by a series of Apple II video games.
We've said it before in previous jumps here, but this is edutainment having its moment as the one potential use for a home computer that hasn't completely worn out its welcome in the ashes of the home computer price wars.
Exactly. And just the idea of melding these experiences and taking advantage of, the computer in the classroom to accompany the exercises, the watching of the video is kind of cool. Now, when I look this up online, I found some interesting comments from people. Some people had great childhood memories of watching the show in class and then interacting with the software. Other people were like, yeah, my teacher just got lazy and for 3 weeks, that's all we did, type of thing. But I also found a review of this software, and one of the things that they do mention is, well, this is fine and dandy for the schools that could afford computers. And for everybody else, now the question is this germane to the experience of learning? Are the kids whose schools don't have computers missing out on something. The haves and have-nots in the technology world gets wrapped up in this debate, especially because this is a PBS show. Public broadcasting. Now, obviously, if you're following the news, as we're recording this in April of 2025, the idea of this being a public good that serves everybody with neutral information is being questioned. But at the time, this really felt like, hey, shouldn't everybody have an equal opportunity at this educational good that is supposed to be available to everybody?
Absolutely.
Oh, and a little side note, there's 4 games, and Ben Affleck is a preteen actor on this show. So, trivia.
Nice. But transmedia is not just for the educational market, as you can also find the treasure using your computer.
Treasure in Search of the Golden Book is a puzzle story book designed by Dr. Krypton and written by Sheldon Renan. The book contains clues to a real-world treasure, a golden horse worth $500,000. The puzzle also will be available as a home video cassette and disc, a cable TV show, a record album, and a combination of board, computer, and video games.
Yeah, this became a fad for a while. I forget what the first one that did this was, but this, I'm sure our Department of Corrections can help, but this became a real fad for a while, this kind of, we're going to bury an expensive treasure somewhere, and then we'll give you a suite of some things that help you find it. In fact, our good Deus Ex Machina friend, Mr. Coucher, or however he pronounces it, will also get in on this racket as a computer game a little bit later on as well.
Yeah. I honestly did not even know that this existed, and I started doing a little bit of a deep dive on all the variations of this kind of gimmick from back in the day. I mean, in this case, nobody ever finds this horse. Supposedly it was then dug up later on by the creators and donated or something, but nobody ever really saw a receipt on that. And some people still believe that, it was never solvable. Blah, 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 blah. Now, looking it up, there's not a lot of real information about the video game part of this. I sent a note to games that weren't about it because we don't know how far it actually got. But as far as I can tell, only the movie and the book appeared, so there was no TV show or anything like that.
Gotcha. Meanwhile, back to our more traditional software offerings, Melbourne returns to Middle-earth.
Melbourne House has announced that they want to follow up on the success of their Hobbit adventure game with a trilogy of titles based on the Lord of the Rings. Contracts have yet to be signed with publishers Allen and Unwin, though. Hobbit programmer Philip Mitchell is waiting for the okay to start work on the titles. And, I mean, they will do it. There will be a trilogy of mostly text-based adventure games. The third one gets a little funky with this. They won't all appear on the BBC Micro and the ZX Spectrum. I believe the third and final one only gets a PC and C64 release. And it's also there, and they don't use the same titles as the books, unfortunately. So it's like Fires of Mordor. Ugh. My tongue is going all over funky on me. But it's a series that unfortunately is going to take so long to release that it's kind of going to outlive its market value due to the format of the games, and not going to be as great. No, it was Crack of Doom, the Shadows of Mordor, and, well, the first one is the Fellowship of the Ring, but the last one's going to come out in 1989. And by then it's just, okay, so yeah, you have a text adventure with some still graphics. We're really impressed. Yeah, it was DOS, C64, and Apple II, curiously enough, and it doesn't even get a European release. It only gets released in the US then.
Yeah. But while Melbourne House might not be doing the most impressive graphical things, we do have some news from one of the more widely regarded graphical companies in the United Kingdom, as Ultimate announces, quote, the first step in a new generation of computer adventure simulation developments, unquote.
Ultimate has 2 new games featuring Saberman, the hero of their hit Saberwolf, in the pipeline. Underworld, a direct sequel, and Nightlore. Nightlore's hyperbole is as vague as it is grand, but it will be almost as important a genre maker for the Speccy as Manic Miner was.
Yes, so many isometric action adventure games following in the footsteps of Nightlore.
Yeah.
Which was seen as seen as absolutely stunning when it came out that Speccy could be made to do that.
Oh yeah, and they're being purposely vague about what it is doing, and they're actually going to have 2 games ready to go using this technology because they know the moment they release the game, others will figure out how to do it as well. So they need to be able to strike while the iron is hot. So we're going to get Nightlore and what was the second game?
Was Alien 8 the second one?
I think so. I think Alien 8 is the second one. But, after that, we're going to get Ocean's going to do Head Over Heels, and there's going to be Movie, and The Great Escape, and Where Time Stood Still, and so many others using that style of a game engine.
Exactly. But it's not just new British games coming to the Spectrum, as Beachhead to get Speccy ports.
US Gold has announced that it will be porting hit US import Beachhead to the Spectrum 48K. And yeah, the reason I included this here was that this really is the start of this. Okay, we've got software from all over the world. We're really going to start specializing in porting. So this is the kind of skill set that's going to allow Ocean to just become, we're going to port your arcade game, or US Gold is going to be bringing in all those Epix titles over and porting them to the Speccy. We're going to get, Skate or Die comes over and lands on the Speccy. Things like this. So this idea that just because the original maker of the game didn't do a version for your platform doesn't mean that there won't be a version for your platform.
Absolutely. And in fact, porting fever is hitting Japan as well as Activision licenses to Japan.
Activision has signed a deal with a Japanese publisher to release their games in the Land of the Rising Sun as MS exports. The deal will cover 12 titles.
There's your man at work, friend of the show, Gregory Fischbach.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And, I mean, we've talked about how Activision at this point in time is still reeling from the death of the video game market in the U.S. They're looking for money wherever they can, and so why not get onto the MSX? Activision announced that their Ghostbusters tie-in, this is sort of a side note, will hit UK shelves in mid-November before the movie's December release date, because the movie hasn't come out in Europe yet at this point. So it was the big summer hit. So in the US, and this was still back in the days when international releases were not a thing yet. And the theme song is already a big hit in the UK. The game will simultaneously launch on the VCS, C64, Spectrum, and MSX. Additional Activision titles will also be making it to the Speccy via their new UK branch.
Indeed.
Yep.
getting those foreign sales where they can, because, of course, things are rather grim in the United States for Activision at this exact moment in time.
Very true. And it's going to get worse once they get the Transformers license. Dun-dun-dun-dun. Sorry.
Indeed. And, of course, it's not just Activision facing headwinds in that U.S. market, because Synapse sues Atari.
U.S. developer Synapse is reportedly suing Atari for £17 million for software developed under contract with Atari while it was still owned by Warner.
And, of course, this is coming. The source for this is Popular Computer Weekly, which is why the number's in pounds. They're two American companies. So
yeah.
The actual lawsuit would have been in dollars, but it comes down to the source. But, yeah, this is just it's the same stuff that we talked about up above, of course. Jack Tramiel has no money, so he is canceling every contract in sight and withholding payment on every contract in sight, whether he has a legal right to or not. And he will see you in court. And here we are.
Oh, yeah. And it does kind of show just, how widespread Atari was. I mean, the fact that they had contracts with these third-party developers, I mean, it tells us a little bit about, could you imagine a 1980 Atari contracting with third-party publishers to bring out games on the system? I mean, but at this point, I mean, good developers have disappeared everywhere. If you were a good developer at Atari, you got a job someplace else. So the fact that these kind of contracts existed says a lot about the status of Atari at the time of its demise.
Indeed. And then moving on to Big Blue, IBM enters Office Suite market and shoots down Kmart PC Junior rumor.
IBM has shot down a rumor reported in the Wall Street Journal that the PC Junior would be showing up in Kmart stores and other mass merchandisers. According to an IBM spokesperson, the company is, quote, very satisfied with our existing dealer network, end quote, of about 1,500 specialty stores.
Now, I have no insider insight here, and I have no idea where these rumors originated, but I would not be surprised if IBM was like, hey, Kmart, you want to sell the PC Junior? And Kmart just laughed at them.
Yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me.
That's what this feels like, because if the Wall Street Journal's bringing it, there had to have been some meat on that bone. But yeah, it sounds to me like that's probably what happened. Now, the other part of the headline about the Office Suite, they're going to be getting into the very big deal right now, which is the integrated Office Suite. Again, what the Plus 4 was trying to pull off is, the future of business software. And IBM's announcement, and this just shows, I mean, the clone makers are out there, but IBM's power in this market is so great. The moment they announced it, there was a massive sell-off in Lotus and Ashton Tate stocks. Two of the biggest software makers in this field. So, IBM is threatening to come in. I wonder who could possibly take on IBM and defeat them in this arena. Definitely not a company out of Bellevue. So...
Well, maybe it's Software Toolworks, Carl, because I do hear Software Toolworks announced cooking book.
Yes. Software Toolworks has announced a new digital cookbook, Chocolate Bites, B-Y-T-E-S. This software includes 100 chocolate recipes culled from the well-known chocolate newsletter, Chocolate News. The big advantage to a normal cookbook is that the program, released for PC, PC Junior, Apple CPM, HDOS, and ZDOS, can automatically adjust recipes to change the amounts one wants to prepare.
Yeah, that might have been great if the pocket calculator hadn't already become a dirt cheap commodity by this time, and you can just punch a few numbers while standing over your cookbook instead of wandering to the other room and pulling up the PC and typing in a bunch of adjustments.
Yeah, but don't you remember the Barbies of the era were telling women that math is hard? So...
Indeed.
But, I mean, I do got to give them props here, because it's what we were talking about earlier with, the internet and having a database. This idea, okay, here's a program. It's got a whole bunch of information on it. It's searchable. And it's not just pulling up the data as it existed in a previous medium. It's actually adding some additional element. And, I mean, nowadays, for example, when I cook, there's a couple of websites with tons and tons of recipes where I can just put in, oh, I'm in Europe. Boom. Turn all those, 2 cups of flour into how many grams of flour do I need? And so on and so forth. That kind of calculation, this is sort of, thinking ahead to that living document concept. I just thought it was kind of cool. You're right. I mean, it's on a big old computer, it's kind of a pointless thing to do.
Yeah.
But the future.
It's not enough of an it's not enough of an advantage to be viable. Time. But yes, the future of thinking about the mutability of that kind of information in a digital environment. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of a nod to the future, PC Paintbrush announced.
Oh yes, while several companies showed some software for the Mac at the National Computer Conference in July, such as digitizers and assembly language compilers, the rest of the world is taking the Mac's aesthetic and trying to bring it to other systems, most notably the IBM PC. One major program of note here is PC Paintbrush by International Microcomputer Software Inc. of San Rafael, California. This $130 package looks a lot like Mac Paint and will ultimately be bundled with mice before Microsoft licenses it and turns it into MS Paint. And yeah, I mean, we can't underestimate the value and the importance of MS Paint in just the way people learn to interact with computers, with mice. I mean, similar to the way it did it with the Mac, but let's face it, nobody really cared because it was too damn expensive and it was only black and white. But also just, I mean, the versatility of MS Paint to create stuff for presentations and everything else is going to reverberate to this very day, where Microsoft tries to kill it and the people will not allow them to kill it.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah. There's a great anecdote I just have to say here. I can't remember. It was one of the 2 co-founders of Naughty Dog. And he said this in an interview years ago when they were working on PlayStation 1 titles. And he had told one of his artists that they needed to put in copyright information at the bottom of the screen. But they didn't have enough memory and they needed some versatility for different territories. So they didn't want to do it as a straight up bitmap. But they wanted to actually have a font made, and the font couldn't be more than, I think, 3x1. So he needed a font that was 3x1 pixels per character. And the artist, a young artist, was like, but Photoshop will only allow me to go down to, I think it was 10x10 at the time. And he just got so irate and pushed the guy off of it, opened up MS Paint, because you could go down to 1x1 on MS Paint, and just created the whole font himself because he was pissed.
Delightful.
Yeah, so yeah.
Love that.
All I have to say is any artist worth their salt should have MS Paint someplace on their computer ready to go at any moment.
Indeed. We now turn our attention to some online news, with our first story here being SEC goes digital.
The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has initiated their Electronic Data Gathering and Retrieval System, or EDGAR for short, which will allow companies to upload their filings and have them retrieved by bankers and investors using home computers. The initial test has 150 companies participating and will then grow to an expected 1,000 by next March. The system should be fully operational by 1986. Companies can submit their filings either over phone lines or via floppy disk. John S.R. Shad, the SEC chairman, said that the system, quote, had the potential to revolutionize the methods under which investment decisions are made and executed, end quote.
And, of course, Edgar still exists to this day, or at least I haven't seen any headlines about Doge dismantling it yet.
They've probably just made sure that all the people who were investigating to make sure that the filings were correct were fired because, because they were probably investigating Tesla and SpaceX and anything else that he's ever touched.
Indeed. Moving on to the Great White North then, Naboo on the ropes.
Last month, we talked about how the Canada-based Naboo Network, an online service built around a Z80 microcomputer, had established a new software arm and gotten new leadership in the form of Thomas Wheeler, former head of the National Cable Television Association. Well, this month, the main backer of the service that launched in 1982, the Camper Corporation, a real estate developer, has decided to withdraw financial backing effective November 13th. This announcement came just a week after Naboo reported a second quarter loss of 5 million Canadian dollars. The company announced that it would be seeking alternative financing, but it was also preparing to let all of its staff go by November 13th. Wheeler is confident, though, that a new backer could be found and that the planned mid-1985 nationwide launch in the U.S. will go forward, even if it is with a new firm licensing the current company's tech.
Aha.
Yeah, this, spoiler alert, isn't going to work out for them. And it's kind of sad. I mean, just as a recap, Naboo was basically running on an MSX. Again, it's that Z80 plus the TI graphics chip that was used in the ColecoVision combo. And it had a bunch of software available for download, including bunch of ports of games like Pitfall and stuff were available on it, and and tons of texts of data, email type service, and so forth. It really was quite cool, but it was very much linked to this hardware platform. It required them to have a ton of inventory of machines, and that appears to have been the ultimate straw that broke the camel's back. Inventory.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, but it is not the only networking service that has hit a bit of trouble in this period, as view data still not catching on.
The Guardian newspaper in the UK reports on how 5 years after its introduction, the post office's Prestel system still has failed to take off. Prestel, a so-called view data system of branching pages of text, has missed the post office's 1979 launch prediction of 100,000 users by 1980, with only 16,350 users by 1982 and only 45,000 by 1984. One of the fundamental flaws was that the system was meant to get ordinary people to use their telephones for the service at night when usage was low, and instead it mainly attracted business users during the day. The now privatized post office tried again as British Telecom with its Micronet 800 system in March 1983, but that too has only managed to attract 10,000 users after 18 months. And here, just to sort of connect the dots between all of these, all the attempts at this point for everyday people to use online services seem to be failing. A lot of these depended on standalone machines that only really worked with the online service, like Naboo, like the original Prestel. now they're branching off. So Micronet 800 is available, I think, for both the Speccy and the C64 at this point. And so that gives it a little bit of additional versatility. But you need to really have a justification for paying the money for this, and just getting some additional software, which you're probably pirating anyway, isn't good enough. But those business people logging on to get valuable up to the second data about stock movements, or being able to pull down those very expansive and otherwise very expensive to obtain annual reports, well, they're really adapting to this well. I mean, it's going to be them dictating how this stuff evolves, pretty much. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I got some side notes here just to give some more technical details about all this. Now I'm kind of regretting I wrote this much now that I'm looking at it, but I'm going to read it anyway because somebody out there is going to find it fascinating. So Prestel has both charged and uncharged frames, because it's basically just a branching set of text units. Each frame has to be reloaded and paid for if charged to get updates, making stock information very, very pricey. AKA, you got to keep reloading the page. Every time you reload, you got to pay more. Also, the frames have a limit of 24 rows of 40 characters, or about 150 words, before borders and other graphics are added. The system was spec'd between 1970 and 72, so each page is limited to 1K of memory, and downloads are set at 1200 baud, meaning it takes 6 seconds to retrieve a frame. The costs included paying for the equipment, paying a fee to join, paying by the hour during business hours, and paying for the download of certain frames. It does have some crude online banking and teleshopping services, though, but these are coming from third parties using the Prestel Micronet backbone. These areas of the service are known as closed user groups, and the providers are information providers, IPs. The Guardian contrasts this with the rise of Teletel in France, where they are installing 10,000 free terminals per week, and for those that can't wait, renting them for 70 francs per month.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, and I haven't researched this area, but France was so much more successful at doing this than really anybody. But, specifically, we're comparing it here to the United Kingdom because they found ordinary, everyday uses for people that were considered valuable enough to take the plunge, unlike ViewDAT.
Well, and it's not just take the plunge, but they figured out basically the modern model for cell phone games here in the early 80s. You get the terminal for free.
Right.
It's just sitting there, and the basic functions like telephone book and stuff is perfectly free. It's all you.
Yep.
And we're going to make our money off the microtransactions. Oh, you want to schedule your next vacation to Mallorca? Fine, do it here. We'll get a percentage of that fee. You want to do X, Y, or Z online banking? We'll take a small percentage of the fee. That's how they're pulling this off. And the government is big enough that they can handle the inventory of hardware without having to justify making money off of it. I mean, 70 francs, that's like $1 maybe. It's not $1, but it's not a lot if you're renting this thing per month. But if you're putting in 10,000 free terminals a week, you're going to have mass adoption in no time. And relying on people's home computers is risky for a variety of reasons. Number one, you're still taking up for what for most people is the only television in the house while you're using this. Mm-hmm. And why aren't people using their telephone at night? Because they're watching TV. Okay. Now, one last thing here. Commodore has launched their online service in the UK, CompuNet. Now, users have to buy the 99-pound 1200 by 75 baud modem, which includes a 1-year subscription to the service, which normally runs at 30 pounds per year. Several programs such as Little Icarus and International Soccer, amazing game, will be available for download, and access will be free from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. And CompuNet is going to run for a long time. That's going to go all the way into the 90s, but Commodore is going to divest itself of it relatively quickly, and then it's going to become a going concern that will also cater to the Amiga and Atari ST crowds.
Indeed.
So,
but of course, VData is not only in the UK, as they have tried to launch it across the pond as well. And this month we also have a Viewtron user profile.
Yes, Viewtron, the View data system launched in 1983 by AT&T and Knight Ridder, gets a profile by the PR Newswire. 12 of the top salespeople at a government securities firm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, were given Scepter terminals needed to access the server for free from their employers. 4 of the employees give some responses to their reactions to the system. The piece is probably a fluff piece generated by Knight Ridder, which is a newspaper company, but some of the responses are interesting as they talk about using the chat boards, email, online shopping, and auction functions. Their encyclopedia function gets mentioned as being updated twice a year, something a printed encyclopedia can't compete with.
Yeah, so it is interesting because you can see that what these people are using it for are the things that the vast majority of people use the modern internet for as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's everyday functions that you would have, go to a garage sale and online auction, but just expanded because you're no longer limited to your corner of physical corner of the world. And so, I mean, yeah, these things are kind of cool. They do talk, though, about the fact that, there's really no graphics. I mean, there's some essentially ASCII character style graphics in this and stuff. So when you're buying goods, you don't really know what it looks like ahead of time. But I think that all of these things are just way too expensive, way too early in the quality. But, I mean, if you were going through this and just figuring out what people like to do then, you kind of know what they're going to like to do 20 years later.
Absolutely. Turning our attention then to the publishing world, computer magazine boom busts.
The computer magazine market, which, according to experts, may have hit a peak of between 150 and 200 publications in 1983 in the United States, has already dropped to between 75 and 100, and, according to analysts, no more than 20 to 30 will survive. The fortunes of the magazines have paralleled those of the hardware manufacturers. As hardware makers hit hard times, they slashed their budgets. In 1982, computer publications had ad revenue of $145 million, which grew to $275 million in 1983 and may hit $520 million this year. Growth, but not commensurate with the explosion in publications. Many mags had full page counts until the very end, suggesting a lot of unpaid ad accounts. David Ahl of Creative Computing Magazine estimates that there is room for no more than 20 magazines left, 5 broad-based publications, 2 to 3 each for the major platforms, and a few, quote, end-user-specific magazines. James Callan, not sure, VP of Marketing at magazine advertising research firm C Systems Limited, expects the number to be down to 20 in the next 18 months.
Yeah, and this goes again to what I was saying before about, the video game crash. This isn't strictly video games, but the video game crash and how, just because you or your friends may have just moved on to a Commodore 64 doesn't mean that there wasn't a massive crash and a massive readjustment of the market, and it was just a smaller number of people moving on to that. And that's seen here as well. Obviously, you had the home computer crash following right on the heels of the video game crash, and I think both crashes are affecting this market. And in this period of time when print still reigns supreme, the number of magazines, the number of monthly or bi-monthly or whatever publications supporting a sector was a great bellwether for the consumer interest and the consumer health in that sector. And this is showing us right here that the health there is not good.
No. And the fact that so many of the magazines still had the full page count until the end, and this is coming from Adweek. This was an Associated Press story, but the idea that they had the full counts until the very end, instead of slowly paring down the page count,
right,
because ads were disappearing, which is, I mean, in our 90s jumps, when I talk about articles coming out of things like Amstrad Action, I mean, that magazine is just down to almost a pamphlet at this point because the ads are no longer there. The fact that they still had the full ads meant somebody wasn't paying the bills. They were still ordering it, and it's hitting these companies so quickly where they're just like, okay, we're just folding and walking away. It's, in the UK, you had it with Imagine. We talked about how they just sort of disappeared. And in my interview with Jazz, who was working over at he wasn't at Zap yet, but he was at computers and video games. They left them holding a huge bag of unpaid ad pages. But here it's happening on such a bigger scale. It's not just one or two big companies. It's dozens of big companies that have left everybody holding the bag. And the magazines are just folding one after the other because of it.
Absolutely. But there are still a few companies left in this space that can afford some ads. And the computer makers are prepping for Xmas ad blitz.
Adweek magazine reports that the major computer makers are prepping massive ad campaigns to promote their computers this coming Christmas season. Commodore is planning a $20 million TV and print ad campaign starting in October to promote the Plus 4. Coleco is spending $15 million on its Adam College Scholarship Promotion TV ad, which Apple is countering with a scholarship sweepstakes of its own for the Apple IIc, with a grand prize of a $50,000 intended for college tuition. They aren't allowed to call it a scholarship. IBM has cut the prices of its PCs across the board and is giving away 750 PC Juniors and 250 PCs in a deal with Procter & Gamble in addition for ads for its new AT and soon-to-be-announced portable attaché PC, leading to IBM's, quote, most extensive, intensive, end quote, advertising program ever. Atari is left a bit behind in all of this as they are still selling off TV ad commitments made before the Tramiel takeover and their agreement with spokesperson Alan Alda. Adweek does expect Atari to buy some ads going into Christmas, though touting the newly reduced price of the Atari 800 XL computer. So yeah. There's some people making some big bets on some terrible, terrible horses. Yeah, I mean, Coleco is just throwing good money after bad with the Atom because that piece of shit is not going anywhere. The Plus 4 is going to be a boondoggle of epic proportions. And yeah, I mean, the Apple IIc is the 2C. I mean, there's not much there.
Yeah.
But this idea of the college scholarship is also indicative of what we've been talking about over the last 2 years, the Reagan's reshuffling of finances for the federal government and the quote unquote, let the states do their thing has really been shooting up college tuition. That has become a real issue in people's lives. Even though by today's standards, it is laughably cheap. So, fun stuff.
Indeed. Absolutely. And then an interesting story in the book area of publishing as Scott Cohen's Zap released.
Zap, The Rise and Fall of Atari is a book about the history of Atari Incorporated, even though Scott Cohen, the journalist author of the book, did not expect the company to implode when he started working on it. He expected to write a story about a high-tech success story, but missed his deadline. Quote, being late turned out to be very much to my advantage, end quote.
Yeah. So, Scott Cohen's Zap is interesting. This is the first book kind of solely dedicated to a topic in video game history, though, I mean, it's not written as a history book. It's written as a journalistic expose or profile. And yeah, it ended up capturing a moment there. Because it's so early, it's been often derided. Marty Goldberg and Kurt Vendel especially, who took their own crack at an Atari history a decade or so back, have had nothing but bad things to say about this book. They claim that Scott Cohen never actually went out there, that he never actually spoke to the people he said he did, that he fabricated interview quotes. I don't know what their evidence for that is, but I don't find any of it credible, because the people that they interviewed in that book, like the things that he identified as block quotes from these people, pretty much are all either things that these same people have said exactly in other interviews or don't contradict anything that they said in other interviews. And like many of them are stories that they have specifically told in other sources. So I don't get any hint of fabrication. I know some Atari or ex-Atari as the case may be at this point, people were unhappy with their lack of participation. Like Alan Alcorn gave a scathing review of this book in some magazine somewhere. Mostly because he was not contacted.
Oh, wow.
And I can understand, Al Alcorn did not participate in this book, and I can understand him being salty about that, being such an important employee for this period of time. And I don't know if Alcorn and others that were not asked to participate in the book were the ones that were feeding Goldberg and Vendel this information, but it feels like real sour grapes rather than actual fact. Now, that isn't to say that the book isn't free of problems. First of all, most of the early history, especially since Alcorn was not involved, is told from the point of view of Nolan Bushnell, who was involved. Yeah. And Nolan's gonna Nolan. So a lot of the early information in the book is inaccurate because of the sources. Like, it's not inaccurate to what Nolan told Scott. It's just inaccurate because you don't want Nolan to be your single source of truth on anything. The other problem is he had caught a company on the rise. So he had basically concluded his interviews and whatnot, I think, by the end of 81 or early 1982 at the absolute latest.
Yeah.
And so he did not have any insider information on what happened in 1982. He covered the crash of the company in the book because the book is coming out here in 1984, but he didn't have insider info on that piece of the story. So his chapter on 1982 and the collapse of the company is basically all just speculation or publicly released information, like, about, announced losses and that kind of thing. And he gets most of the speculation wrong, and it's very unhelpful and unuseful. But in the middle, there's actually some interesting material in there that is still insightful today, because he talked to some interesting people that haven't been as thoroughly interviewed in other places, including some of Atari's Coinop distribution partners, or really just one. He talked to the Bettlemans.
Oh.
And he talked to Steve Bristow and Lyle. I think Lyle Raines is quoted in there someplace, though I could be wrong. And most intriguingly of all, he has a few quotes from Don Osborne, the VP of sales in Coinop that died of a heart attack in 1982. I believe it was 82. And so, of course, was never interviewed by other historians because he died while he was still at the company before everything had unfolded. So there's still some interesting and useful block quotes in there from some of the participants, and he does do a good job of identifying quoted material. He does present them as block quotes, so you know who's talking. So I still find it a useful asset today, even if it has been superseded in some areas and is inaccurate in others. And I would dismiss the Goldberg-Vendel accusations. There's no indication that anything was made up or forged or whatnot. The inaccuracies come down entirely to the reliability of his sources, and in the case of the later material, his access to useful sources to explain what was going on at the company.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, and I mean, there's a link to a digital version of the book over on Archive in the show notes. I just did a cursory glance at the first couple chapters, so I honestly did not know how reliable this was or not. But I did find that it was interesting that it came out this early. Now, at the time, he also gave a bunch of interviews about it. And on the topic of Jack Trammell's takeover, this is what he had to say at the time. Quote, "If Trammell brings it back up so it's a great company once again, and they go up against Commodore, it would be a great reason to write another book about it." Yeah. The Commodore versus Atari book that would have just been, you know, two people sort of slapping each other in the middle of a driveway after a kegger. Yeah.
Or the fish slapping dance from Monty Python.
That would be awesome too.
Indeed. Turning our attention now to legal news, FCC helps fight Coinop piracy.
The U.S. Federal Communications Commission has met with the Amusement Games Manufacturers Association to share information about pirated Coinop games. The FCC, as part of its spot inspections to ensure compliance with Class A computing device standards, the rules that govern how much interference a device is allowed to emit, has been discovering a lot of illegitimate boards and games out in the field. They will be sharing information about these machines with AGMA going forward to help battle piracy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes sense that the pirates are maybe not being quite so careful about about how their boards emit in a public space.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even know if it's that the boards are not doing aren't in compliance, but there's supposed to be a sticker on the back of them, so they're easy to identify as okay. There's no sticker. Let's look into it. And that's when they're discovering that these are pirated boards. And yeah, so this news report just makes sense. And we've mentioned it a million times on the show. Every month there's more and more reports of manufacturers going after and suing people for selling pirated machines, for using pirated machines. I just don't include all those stories in here because it doesn't really add anything new unless there's some big development. But this one just seemed relevant enough because of this idea of this is one way to catch these pirated or cloned machines.
Absolutely. But the U.S. is not the only place where a lot of smuggling is going on these days, as electronic smuggling on the rise in Brazil.
The Brazilian government's attempts to grow its domestic electronics industry has led to growing smuggling activity. Brazil's massive $100 billion national debt has forced them to implement austerity measures and restrict the importation of many products, including electronics, to spur domestic production. The demand is so high, though, that many, especially foreign manufacturers, are trying to get components in. 4 local export-import companies were caught falsifying paperwork to bring in components from NEC, Sony, and Matsushita for resale to those same companies' local subsidiaries. The 25-ton haul caught last May was worth $3.6 million. The local subsidiaries denied any wrongdoing, as the paperwork they were shown seemed to be in order. Federal police reported confiscating over $25 million worth of contraband in the city of Sao Paulo alone over the past year. The components are used for everything from TVs, tape recorders, and even video games.
Yeah, as the article hints at here, the military government of Brazil at the time was very stringent on how electronics could be imported and manufactured in the country, and basically were of the opinion that everything needed to be manufactured there. So every single worldwide conglomerate of any kind that wanted to do business in Brazil actually had local subsidiaries in Brazil that were more local Brazilian companies than they were subsidiaries of international companies because of the ways that they were stringently regulated. It's kind of what Japan had done back in the 50s and 60s, and probably modeled off of that, I would imagine, because they had some great success in catching up on technological production after the war by requiring these same kind of joint ventures and assigning of patent rights and all of these kind of things with local companies. But obviously having a little bit of trouble getting off the ground here.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously a lot of these components are very high tech. I mean, this is the beginning of everything's got to have a chip in it. So I can definitely imagine that it would be easier for them to be able to import those products. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of this underhanding stuff. Obviously, for people outside of Brazil, the most famous version of this is going to become Tectoy with its license for Sega product. And I mean, these are the kind of models that these business models will also then come to Argentina in 84, 85 after the military is gone. And that's going to lead to companies like Drian suddenly making Commodore 64 computers and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's a weird little microcosm, but it does show that the international trade is something that is not as free-flowing in all parts, and somehow tariffs don't work. Go figure.
Who knew? As every reputable economist rolls their eyes. Yeah. Turning our attention to some lawsuits now, Activision sues Revco.
Software maker Activision has revised their lawsuit against nationwide drugstore chain Revco DS Inc. The original lawsuit, filed in May of 1984, sought payment for $8.3 million worth of Activision product that Revco agreed to purchase. Revco agreed to pay the entire purchase price and paid $6.4 million between May 15th and July 30th, but still has about $1.9 million outstanding. Activision has now filed an amended complaint asking for the remainder plus interest.
Yeah, so I want to give a little background on what's going on here, some of which is culled from other trades, and some of which is culled from the CFO of Activision at around this time, who was only CFO for like a year or like 16 months or something, like randomly wrote a memoir. He's not a famous person. He just randomly wrote a memoir on his life and business. So that includes an Activision chapter that talks a little bit about this. So basically, the common thing that people talk about in the crash is that, inventories were flooded and companies couldn't retailers couldn't return product, and so they just all put it in the discount bins at the front of the store. And obviously that did happen, but what is talked about a lot less often is that the major manufacturers that were caught with a lot of inventory couldn't force traditional retail venues to take any more product at a certain point because they did not care. The only thing they could hold over them is, well, if you don't take this, you won't get our next hit game. And it's like, dude, this ain't going to be a hit. Your next game ain't going to be a hit. Go away. And so what a lot of companies did, including Mattel and Activision, is started dealing to remaindering companies, which are companies that solely exist to buy up completely unsellable inventory for pennies on the dollar and then just dump it in their stores at the absolute lowest prices possible. And so Activision and Mattel both, but we're only really talking about Activision here, did a deal with a company called Odd Lot Trading in New York City, which was a remaindering company that did just that. They'd buy up stuff for cheap, and then they were going to like sell these cartridges at odd lots for like $1 a piece. So the manufacturer gets a little bit of money. They don't recoup everything, but they get something. And, this company, makes their money with these low overhead operations. Odd Lot was purchased by Revco, which was a traditional drugstore company, in April of 1984. So it was right before all of this was going down that they were purchased by Revco. And so Activision thought that Odd Lot would be an okay partner, in part because they were owned by a New York Stock Exchange company, Revco. Mm. And so they made a deal for a lot of inventory, but of course, the market is continuing to collapse all through this. And it seems like Odd Lot was having second thoughts. So as the CFO described in his memoir, at first, before any lawsuits, the company tried to lowball them and come in with a new offer to take them for less, probably because they were like, oh, shoot, we're not going to recoup our money on this because everything is awful. And so they claimed that the merchandise had been damaged in shipping, that it had been left out in the rain at one step on one leg of its journey by rail, and that the inventory was mostly a loss. But out of their kindness of their hearts, they would still give them a small amount of money for it. And as the CFO describes it, Alan Epstein, who would later be the CEO of Accolade, but who at this time was head of operations for Activision, VP of operations, had made sure that they had pictures taken of the merchandise and sworn affidavits from like warehouse staff or whatever at every location along the way, so they could conclusively prove that there was essentially no water damage. It is true that it had rained and a couple of boxes had gotten some light rain on them, but no damaged merchandise, and they had the proof of it. And they threatened to sue, and from what the CFO said, they backed down at that point and took the inventory. So it's possible he's misremembering and there was also a lawsuit, or it's possible that at that point the situation was resolved at that time. And it wouldn't surprise me if they were able to resolve at that time, but then suddenly Odd Lot got skittish about making payments again and was trying to back out again later, because they did end up suing. And that's the situation we had here. So that none of that's in the article, but since we haven't had any other articles or coverage of this, I just kind of wanted to give the background to this whole saga that Activision had with Revco and its subsidiary Odd Lot Trading.
Oh, that actually makes so much more sense than this. Because, I mean, obviously we had a lot of situations where all sorts of stores were selling cartridges during the 83 Christmas season. So this is really where I originally placed this in my brain before you told me this story. But that actually makes it far more interesting. Especially, I mean, yeah, those kind of stores that just sell the old crap that nobody else could get rid of anymore. In Florida, Big Lots was one of these major chains.
Yep.
And I remember finding all sorts of weird old games or whatever in those places. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And, however, while Activision maybe should have foreseen some of the problems they were going to have with Oddlot, it seems that on a higher plane of existence, psychics didn't see the crash coming. How's that for transition?
Beautiful, beautiful. Delphi Associates, a psychic consulting firm, has filed suit against Atari Games Corporation over breach of contract. Delphi spent 18 months working with Atari on a game to help players develop, quote, extrasensory perception, end quote. Delphi claims to not have been paid for the last 3 months. Delphi claims it is owed $10,000 a month until 1986, not counting licensing and royalty payments.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, this is a Madame Cleo type situation. Didn't see that coming, did you? Yeah, what exactly they were developing, God only knows. But then again, Atari had so many weird projects in the offing. I mean, it was probably something to do with a headset, but who knows?
Probably. But for those who thought that Uri Geller was the first psychic to ever sue a video game company.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the Pokemon thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the Pokemon suit.
Yeah. Yeah, no. These guys beat him to it by at least almost a decade. So there you go.
Indeed. All right, turning our attention then at the end to some miscellaneous news items as we always do. First of all, video games go art.
Disarming Images, Art for Nuclear Environment, is a touring exhibit of art reflecting the theme of nuclear disarmament and the angst of living in a nuclear world. The exhibit has many images and sculptures, but the most interesting may be a video game called Mike Builds a Shelter. Possibly the first art video game, the game is running off of a C64 built into a faux arcade cabinet and has the player controlling the title character as he tries to move boxes of supplies into the bomb shelter below his house before a nuclear bomb detonates. The game is impossible to win and is part of a larger series of video and art creations by artist Michael Smith.
That's very interesting. They should have put a Missile Command cabinet next to it, though, don't you think?
Well, see, that would have given you the hope that you might be able to stop it. This was more... Now, the interesting thing here is there was some television reporting on this at the time. There were several news articles about it. Mike Smith himself did a whole bunch of short films, talking about survival and stuff as a comedy bit. But somebody has actually managed to salvage the original program code.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, the program code has been saved and they've actually rebuilt the cabinet. There's a link to this in the show notes. Somebody actually rebuilt the damn thing. And it's quite interesting because, I mean, it's got fairly good animation of the little character picking up the packages, going down the stairs and all this stuff. It really was done as an art exhibit, and it probably would have faked being an arcade cabinet of the time fairly well. I mean, sort of on the graphical level of like a Donkey Kong.
Sure. That's a very cool story. Not just that it existed, but that it was preserved. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that when weird little cul-de-sacs of game development end up getting preserved, years later. Cool stuff.
Oh, definitely. I mean, shout out to games that weren't. It wasn't one of theirs, but still, as a contributor to the website, I always like it when people go over there. They're finding prototypes of stuff all the time.
Indeed. But it is not only art, but also architecture and design that is benefiting from computers as CAD, CAM, computer vision.
Computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing systems, or CAD-CAM, are a booming market. Industry Week magazine reports that growth estimates vary from 30 to 50%, and sales are expected to exceed $6.9 billion by 1987. The leaders at the moment are computer vision and IBM, with IBM quickly gaining ground on computer vision, but in a market that has seen a massive number of new entries, growing from about 20 vendors in 1980 to more than 100 in 1983. And who knows what will happen.
AutoCAD, Carl, that's what'll happen. AutoCAD.
Exactly. So anybody who's listened to my interview with Servan Kyonjin, he made the wonderful connection between these early systems and how they started to establish the foundations of what would then become the drivers for things like Direct 3D later on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is
sense.
where all of this starts. I mean, OpenGL is going to come out of these kind of systems, and so on and so forth. And very importantly, they're showing just what is possible with this kind of tech. And on a complete side note, because I've mentioned it here before, I have a weird obsession with Chuck E. Cheese's attempt to do animated movies.
Yes.
And my YouTube algorithm knows this. So I just 2 days ago watched a 1981 BBC documentary about computer graphics, where in addition to a bunch of people doing CAD/CAM, people at Lucasfilm working on what would become the Pixar system, and Nolan Bushnell, because they talk about computer graphics and video games and so forth, they actually showed video footage of the New York Institute of Technology's tweening system for animation.
Ah.
I finally got to see it. They actually they talk through the process of what the tweening is, and now I know exactly why the Chuck E. Cheese movie could never work. Because they didn't actually, what you did was you didn't say, okay, here are the lines and make up, let's say, the feet of a character. And now I'm going to morph those to the next position and change the XY values. Instead, you drew a second pair of feet and told it how many frames between those two, and the computer then had to sort of guess how to morph those. It was a morphing technology, which apparently, and they showed us an animation, works really good as long as the characters are very, very simple line drawings. If you look at the characters in the Chuck E. Cheese thing, they're full-blown animated characters with patterns on their clothes and stuff. There is no way on God's green earth that this primitive system would have been able to guess where to go with the lines from frame to frame. And that's why what they finally released was just a slideshow. And everybody I've talked to so far on that project said, yeah, the tweening never really worked. But after now seeing this video, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's about 20 minutes into this hour-long film. When you see how that actually works, it's like, oh yeah, there's no way you could do a full-blown character. It works for really, really simple line drawings, but anything more is going to just break it. And that's what happened. But okay, sorry.
No, that's great. Great. It's always nice when you fill in a gap. Like when something that you were wondering about, you finally make that discovery that like locks it in and makes it all make sense. So
exactly. Yeah, I feel whole again. It's been bugging me for at least a year now. So now that's whole. I just wanted to say that because they were also doing some 3D model stuff, which obviously does have more legs and goes other places. But okay.
Absolutely.
So yeah, CAD/CAM is exploding. 3D graphics are on their way. There's a great quote from the article that's the main reference here. And it is, unlike the home computer market, users and potential users of these systems have no difficulty identifying the benefits.
Burn. But of course, also, those are very small populations that will be paying lots of money for very expensive systems. I mean, it's not like nobody knew that computers were incredibly useful by 1984. It was just they couldn't find cheap uses, practical uses for computers in 1984.
Exactly. But I saw that line and I was just like, oh, that's hard. That's harsh.
Indeed. Turning our attention now to a human interest story. Seniors test their skills on crystal castles.
A research study in a New Jersey senior residence center is testing to see if hand-eye coordination can be improved through the use of gameplay. Twice a week, the seniors are asked to play crystal castles. Apparently, someone is finding a use for the Coinop games.
I mean, it's not quite Wii Sports, but, you know.
Well, I mean, it's got the big ball. I mean, It's a trackball game, which would definitely put it in a different category than, for example, something with a joystick.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting. And our next story, just when you thought you were rid of him again, Nolan is back.
Nolan Bushnell is back after the sale of Sente with a new games company, Axlon. Their first product are a line of trivia cards compatible with such games as mega hit Trivial Pursuit.
Yeah, I mean, and, you know, obviously they're calling Axlon a game company because it's Nolan, and what else would you call it? But really, Axlon was more trying to be a toy company, though an electronic, high-tech toy kind of company, rather than specifically being in video games. And, of course, it was one of many companies, many irons in the fire that he had here through his Catalyst technology. They're particularly going to try to get into the home toy robot field, which briefly sees a bit of heat around this time, and of course never really get anywhere than that. And another fun fact is they were run by a young Tom Frazina, who would go on to be the original CEO of Accolade and then spend a lot of years with Electronic Arts.
Oh, really? Okay, that is interesting, because Accolade has got to be founded here any minute now. In 84.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he wasn't at Axlon for long.
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, yeah, that's got to be 84, 85 is Accolade, so. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, Law of the West is coming out, 85.
Yeah, Accolade was founded in 84, released its first games in 85. I'm not sure exactly what month Frazina joined, because he was not a co-founder, but he was hired by Miller and Whitehead to be the first CEO.
Very cool.
So, indeed. Turning our attention to media news, Dragon's Lair debuts on Saturday morning.
On September 8th, ABC premiered Dragon's Lair, a 13-episode series of Saturday morning cartoons based on the Laserdisc game. Don Bluth did not return to do the animation, with Ruby Spears Productions stepping in to take over those duties. This, of course, led to some serious downgrades to animation quality and the need to expand the character roster and personalities of the characters, but the show kept a cliffhanger-like element going into ads that paralleled the decision trees of the original arcade game.
Indeed. Of course, television, particularly network television, takes a while to develop, which is why, ironically, not ironically, but the flowering of video game television is 1983, 1984, right when the entire video game industry has gone in the crapper, which, of course, also short-circuits the spread of video game shows and animation as well. But yeah, it's just they're a little bit behind because they're signing stuff up as it's hot and then starting to develop, which takes a while. And so all those shows like Saturday Morning Supercade and Dragon's Lair and everything are coming out just a little too late to ride the wave.
Yeah, but interestingly enough, Don Bluth does give this now he has made comments about how he absolutely detests the quality of the animation in the show, but he has also said that it's the longevity of Dragon's Lair is probably due to the show.
Sure. Because
this was a fairly big hit. I mean, I was there September 8th. I saw that premiere episode. Dragon's Lair had already captured my imagination in the arcades. and more Dragon's Lair, even if I could tell that it was a much, much poorer version of it, was always going to be welcome. And so, yeah, I was glued to my TV every Saturday and watched every episode of that show. It was brilliant. It was brilliant for the time.
Sure. Yeah. You have to always take that into account. But yeah, absolutely.
Don't go back, though. Oh, my God, don't go back.
Right.
Oh, my God, is it is bad. Ooh, is it bad?
I can certainly believe it. Never seen it, but I certainly believe it.
The only thing worse are the Space Ace shorts that were part of the Supercade. Those are actually worse, somehow. I'm not sure how, but they made them worse.
Indeed. All right, and we wrap up our stories for this month with something I don't think we've had for a couple of jumps, which is another fond farewell. This time we are washing off our rat slime as we bid Millstar R.I.P.
Venerable pinball and video game maker Gottlieb, a.k.a. Millstar, will be shut down effective September 30th. Columbia Pictures Industries Incorporated, parent company of Millstar and itself a Coca-Cola subsidiary, made the announcement about the North Lake, Illinois company. Quote, "Our decision not to continue there is the result principally of adverse market conditions and the persistent deterioration of the markets for our products." Columbia Pictures Chairman and Chief Executive Frank T. Vincent Jr. said in a statement, 230 employees will be affected.
Now, obviously, everybody was going through bad times, and, savvier companies than them, were either ceasing to be or, just completely shifting out of Coinop into other things. But this does seem like an appropriate moment to share a story from Frank Ballou, who was at Millstar for about 10 seconds. Like, he doesn't even put it on his resume. But he was there for about 10 seconds in early 84, I believe. Earlier than this. He wasn't there when it closed.
Yeah.
He went back to Nintendo. But as he puts it, likes to put it, the Coca-Cola executives were super, super smart people, as you would expect a company that has been as successful as Coca-Cola. He then said the Columbia executives were a bunch of idiots. And the example that he gives is, he had contacts in Japan, and he made a deal for the take-on game Bomb Jack. Classic game.
Oh, yeah.
And made a deal for Millstar to be the distributor of that game in the United States. And I forget, he told me in our interview years ago, but, it was for a certain number of units. Let's call it 5,000. That's not necessarily the real number, but let's call it 5,000. And when he went to the Columbia executives, they were like, well, it doesn't seem to be worth it for that small an amount, does it? So we're not going to do that.
What?
And that is the moment that he knew there was no future at Millstar, and he went back to Nintendo.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that would make me want to go back to Nintendo as well. I mean, 5,000 units of an arcade cabinet in 1980. No.
Yeah, I forget the exact number, but it was around there. It was certainly something reasonable for the time. It wasn't like for 200 units or something. It was reasonable for the time,
Oh, Jesus. Talking about unreasonable decisions. Side note here to Millstar / Gottlieb's demise. There's an auction notice for Millstar equipment that appears in this month's replay. They are auctioning off 386 upright Mach 3 units and 97 cockpit Mach 3 units to the highest bidder. Bids must be in by September 18th.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned this in another jump, but I've also talked to Howard Rubin, who was head of their video game division for a long time. And basically Mach 3 was very successful and, when it first started. And Ruben kind of felt that the market had done its thing, but then those same, folks higher up the chain that Blue was complaining about was like, no, this game's selling well. We have to keep making more. And so they actually ended up shooting themselves in the foot because it was actually a pretty well-regarded Laserdisc game, and then they just kept making it when they shouldn't have. And, there you go. Now they're auctioning off units. Of course, while Millstar, Rat Slime backwards, which is why I made that reference earlier. And as former Gottlieb employees like to point out, that Millstar spelled backwards is Rat Slime. Of course, while Millstar may be gone, in fact, it will not be leaving us in spirit because it won't be too much longer till the head of pinball at the company, Gil Pollock, will be purchasing what's left of it to create his own pinball company, Premier Technologies. But I'm sure that will come up in another jump since you are following the coin trades these days.
Oh, definitely. That is coming down the pipeline. But first, things must be auctioned off. There's a bunch of Laserdisc players that need a new home.
Indeed.
Well, that concludes our news stories for this month, but it does not, however, conclude your duties, good sir. So what is the word of the episode?
Well, Carl, this one was a truly tough one. Oftentimes I know halfway through the episode, where I'm going to be going with this, having kind of seen the trend of the headlines. This time I could not find any real headline, series of headlines that I could connect into a theme. And then I realized, Carl, that this time that absence of headlines is actually the headline. And so I am going to go with nadir as the word of the episode because I feel like we had very few news stories that were actually about video games this month. And
that's true.
And you know what, Carl? That makes sense because we are mired right in the middle of the absolute low point of this industry where all of the old companies have given up on being able to release anything more. I mean, there will be a smattering of 84 and even early 85 releases, but everyone's basically given up on making money in console games. Factories are idle in the Coinop world. People are still playing computer games, but kind of the whole home computer market has crashed as well.
Yeah.
Which means that there aren't a lot of headlines or a lot of tracking by the media about what's going on in computer games, even though they're continuing to be played. And so I think nadir just about sums up where we have landed here, Carl.
You know what? I think that you are right. And writing this episode, it really did feel like, okay, consoles are truly dead. The computer market is still computer game market is just finding its voice. I mean, games like Elite, Impossible Mission, Crime and Punishment. I mean, these are games that are trying to figure out, okay, what can we do different? What really defines the computer, and moving away from the model of the turn-based RPGs that, defined computer gaming at the time of console gaming. When they were both parallel, you didn't really want to step on the other's foot. But now suddenly, real-time action games that also have the intellectual components added to it of classic computer games. And it's going to become a genre in itself. It's going to become its own thing over the next 2 years. And I think that we're just beginning to see that. And yeah, the consoles are going to be sleeping for a while until, that Famicom shows its face in North America again. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it'll be an interesting little wait and as we begin to see this happen. Okay, please remind the fine folks at home where they can find your fine work.
Well, as always, I do have my my own podcast, my other podcast, They Create Worlds, which can be found at theycreateworlds.com, and also podcast.theycreateworlds.com. It is available at Spotify, iTunes, whatever your favorite podcast provider is. And yeah, that's me.
Sweet. And remember, everybody, you can support us here on Patreon if you're watching over that. First part of my interview with Jeff Johannigman is already up on Patreon. It'll be coming out a little bit after this on the regular feeds. Second part of that still needs to be cut. And also remember, there's a video add-on, the video version of the 7 Minutes in Heaven. And all of those have now been posted on YouTube. They are no longer Patreon exclusives. So go and check those out. And maybe very soon we'll have a whole bunch of extra ones of those because people seem to like them, I guess. Yeah, that's all for us. And have fun. Cool. We're good.